Oh, sorry, it's live, aren't we? I should say something as it's a recording. Sorry. Just doing the post the link crap. And such. I think it's there. It appears to be there. So save that. And should put it in the comments too, but I don't know if I want to take that chance. Just reminding me. Oh, look at that. Live now. Look at that. They have a live now thing that pops up in my video. Cool. So people can come to the room. Anyway. Let's see the changes, didn't I? Yes, I did. Yeah, it's good enough. It's in the low bar, the whatever. The link. The description. So anyway, I did watch the first sentence of Hothday's latest video. Is maybe we're cross purposes. Yeah, maybe we are, you asshole. And whose fault is that? I don't know how you can't be paying attention, but you know, we're talking about a field of stars that Piro says is creating lensing. There's a field of stars, and he says they're creating a lens that creates a blob of light. And my argument is when you add up the field of stars, they don't have enough density to create enough gravity to bend light. I mean, the whole idea of gravitational lensing in a galaxy could only really work if the lens was in the really center part of the galaxy and you speculated that there was 40 black holes in there or something. But it can never work for a big giant lens that's as big as the galaxy, because the outside of a galaxy is the most ungravitational place in the universe. It's like the outside of our solar system. You can't bend light out there. There's no gravity out there. Pluto is out there, and Pluto's barely even moving. I mean, Pluto takes like 90 years to go around the sun once. I don't know what its real orbit is, but it takes a long time for Pluto to go around just once. But anyway, so yes, we're at cross purposes, but you're not paying any attention. And your presumption is to defend the status quo. And even worse than that presumption, I wouldn't mind so much if you were defending science, but you're sitting there basically trying to say Piro is making some sort of coherent argument in defense of physics, and he's not. And that's just so irritating. Why don't you call him out on the fact that water waves don't create an interference pattern unless you fuck up the experiment? I mean, you know, making little simple waves in water and then having them go through a single slit, they won't come out interferenced. All right. So one of the subjects I didn't get to, one of the new things I was thinking about, is refraction. That's a really, you know, the whole reflection, you know, why light reflects and how it's determined whether it will reflect. Because there's a certain angle, this Brewster angle, where when the light comes at the surface, it ends up 100% polarized. And then after that angle, it automatically all reflects, which is also an interesting concept. So there he is. Holiday. So I only watched the first, like I said, first 60 seconds of your video and this cross-purpose thing. And yes, of course we're at cross-purposes, because I don't think you're paying attention to the videos you're critiquing and the subject that's happening. I mean, my argument's not about solid bodies. My argument is about a field of stars creating gravitational lensing. That's what Piro's saying. There's a field of stars, and he's saying there's lensing happening. Now, I've already established that lensing has to be seen in the lens. Okay, the lens is like the screen, not the projector in the case of gravitational lensing. So,
my son.
how you doing?
Good, yourself?
Well, I'm always irritable because I don't know how you haven't killed your paw yet because he's an
He's much easier going than yourself.
Yeah.
Right. So you've not watched the video then, have you not?
Must have all the glue, the bricks in the yard glued to the ground, so it'd be just too tempting. Yeah, I just whack him with a brick. Who's gonna know? I'm just saying, bird did it. Yeah.
So you've not watched that video?
Well, I haven't. No, I didn't watch it yet because I planned on doing a room, and I just woke up and I said I'm going to go do my room. I'm not going to spend my time watching the video. And now, like I said, you're saying we're at a cross purpose, and I'm just basically saying, yes. You don't get that, but I already understand this whole concept of I could make the Earth this, and I could make the sun out of, I could make the sun out of actual dog shit, and then I could figure out what the gravity is. But the point is I was, I'm not saying I was too advanced for you, but I'm just saying when these guys do this figuring, when you have a field of stars, this is basically how they figure out what the gravity is. They draw a circle around the field, okay? And then you take all the crap in the field, and that becomes M1 and M2. And then you just take the radius of that field, right? So the R2 is the radius of the field. Okay, the M1, the M2 is the total mass of everything in the field.
Right.
So I'm saying if I want to know what the gravity of the location is, that's what I do. And what I'm saying is when you add up the gravity of a field, obviously you're counting the empty space as part of the density. So what I'm saying is quite obviously it's like having a thing made out of something super light because all the objects get diluted by the space, which means the total atomic weight of that field becomes infinitesimally small. It's like making it out of a rice cake. Okay, it's like having the sun made out of rice cake. I mean, it's not going to have any gravity, right? If I made the sun out of rice cake, you understand that the gravity would be almost nothing.
Okay, I understand a little bit better, but you will grant me at least, I mean, that you and Pyro was having a dispute about density and the strength of gravity as a function, as looking at the formula and whether it was a factor. And as you were having a dispute on that issue, as it seemed to be and lie there and then, then I had a chip to put in,
But I know, but I kept saying inverse square over and over and over again. So I just mean that isn't that the total definition of the problem? The inverse square means your gravity dilutes much faster than any other geometry. The geometry of your gravity is diminishing by a cubed factor. Okay, while your distance is by a squared factor. If I can cheat and use that as a definition, okay, it's like your gravity is getting weaker by a cubed factor, and your distance is only increasing by a squared factor. And so, obviously, the further away you go, the ability for you to create an angle of reflection, or an angle of deflection, an angle of diffraction becomes weaker and weaker and weaker with every inch you move away from
the inverse square law.
With every inch you move away, you're essentially creating less and less density because you're putting more space in the circle of the lens.
Well, you did make those points, but you also was at stages head to head and saying density matters, density doesn't matters. And you had this formula. The point being is we can move on, but I'm just saying I feel a little bit aggrieved when you come down hard on me as though I'm nitpicking, when you really were at loggerheads over this issue of density. And insofar as that, myself and Pyro, I think, were thinking about density, we're all in agreement about the importance of density.
I'm just saying he's not quite. I just don't know how you can. I don't know how you can measure a field of stars without using the total density of the mass in the field as the M factor. How else can you use the M1 and M2 equation if you don't total all the stars together and sum their mass? How else can you use the equation? There aren't two masses in this equation. There's 500 masses in the equation. How does M1 and M2 help you when there's 500 masses without you talking about density?
The point being is density doesn't come into it because you do total the masses, and then that largest circle, what you've just said, comes into effect.
Exactly, and that's the volume. I didn't even use the word density as often as I use the word volume. It has to do with the volume. The volume, the R squared is the volume number. It's telling you how big the bucket is that you just put your flea in.
Well, I think we can just
I'm not trying to argue it to death. I'm just saying that
without talking about the density. I think we could actually get by, because it seems in principles we're in total agreement about everything, really.
Okay, I just don't see how you do that when you have a conversation about things like black holes or anything else. Density is critically important because it depends on what you're making the matter out of. If you make the matter out of hydrogen, the sun has pretty weak gravity.
Sure, I agree.
I make the sun out of iron, and the sun all of a sudden has gravity of about 700 meters per second, right? I mean, I don't know what, if you took the sun and made it out of iron, I wonder what the gravity would be, right? Because we're talking about something that's 1.4 billion meters across. I just wonder what that gravity would be, because I think it'd be absolutely immense.
Yeah, sure. It might even be collapsed to a black hole, but, by the theory. But right, so can we? Right, so to me, we can park that issue. I tried to make the point in my last video that if we're both in agreement that the effect, the force of gravity, on the edges of galaxies, on the edges of solar systems, is really minute because of the inverse square law. But even though it's minute, therefore it has a minute effect. Now, the question of whether it's negligible for anybody in the entire visible universe is a question about, even though it's minute, is it minute enough such that it's ostensibly parallel lines going out of the visible universe, or will it bring in a focus point within the visible universe? Because if it's minute but brings a focus point, let me finish. I'll just 1 minute, please. If it's minute enough such that it brings in a focal point within the visible universe, then it isn't negligible for somebody in the visible universe.
Well, I would argue that it is, in the sense that we're only refracting a portion of the total photons coming off an object. So the inverse square law also applies to light. So you sort of have to understand that, yes, it's very convenient to put your object very far away from your lens. Okay, I mean, obviously having the object you're looking at very, very far away from the lens is a huge advantage in terms of you need a lot less angular diffraction. But the point is also that you're only going to be lensing a tiniest of portions of the photons. So in my opinion, theoretically, there's no possible way to create a visible image, okay? There's a point where the image can't be visible because you don't have enough photons. So again, if I make the porcupine argument, the porcupine shoots 1,000 quills. If the quills are so far away, those 1,000, they become so spread out that you're only going to get 1 photon per year that'll hit that lens, let alone photons in some sort of sequence that you could take a picture of. So I'm just saying your resolution of the photons will become impossible if your thing you're looking at is too far away, because you're gaining no visible percentage of the photons available will hit your lens.
Okay, but I think there's a mismatch between not a mismatch, or a merging between some of your theoretical ideas there and what's commonly.
I'm saying that's Newton's physics. I'm just saying the fact that there's a limited number of photons produced by an object, that the light bulb has a limited amount of lumens, that's Newton. Okay, Newton wouldn't tell you the flame gets brighter because you're lensing it. No, he would say limited number of flames. If you're far enough away, you're not going to see the flame because there's not enough photons to resolve. And I'm just saying that, okay, well, I'm just saying, so that's my gripe about that. But the real total gripe is that I think you need to give me some sort of concession that this evidence is horrible, that I can, with every one of these galactically lensed images, I can point out that if you take the total length of the smear, it's billions of light years across. Okay, that means the lens has to be humongous. And if you add up those photons from something that distant, the thing would have to be not 5 times brighter than any galaxy we've ever seen. It'd have to be 5,000 times brighter than any galaxy we've ever seen, if it's as far away as they want to put it, to say they have enough gravity to bend the light. So I'm just saying, this is another one of these arguments where, I mean, you've got to concede this evidence is bad. It's not good evidence. It's crappy evidence. And again, I'll go back to my argument about Hubble. But I mean, you have 2 circumstances where you have 2 ways to prove lensing. You have the surface one, which is rock solid. I mean, that's Einstein safe on the surface of the sun. And you have this other theoretical one made out of, well, if we make the lens long enough, we can make this happen, blah, blah, blah. And yet it doesn't happen except in this sloppy manner. We haven't found a single galaxy that we can lens one day, and then we can lens another day, and we can lens another day. Not one single repeatable frickin' image in the bunch. And I'm just saying, this is the evidence they have telling me they're bending light with gravity. I'm saying this is the crappiest pile of crap evidence you could possibly compile.
Before dealing with that point, right? Well, it's all one point really. It seems to me that to an extent, these are fairly easy classical calculations that you can make. By their formulas. Remember, to my mind, we're having an argument about what classical established physics says, right?
We're having about the evidence.
Yeah, I know. We're talking about evidence as well.
About the formula is the whole thing on the hook here. The formula is a piece of crap. I mean, Einstein makes this distinction that the only way Einstein made gravitational lensing realistic, in the fact where Newton said you're not going to get it, is the fact that he gave, because of his stupid time dimension, he gave the lensing twice the effect. So, instead of the lensing only having, like, say, a 100 zillionth of an angle being created when light deflected, because of his time dimension, he stuck the light in the lensing twice as long. So I pointed out in that last video that there's 2 factors here. There's how long you're in the gravity, okay, and then there's how much gravity there is. And obviously how much gravity there is changes as you get closer and closer to the object, then it gets weaker and weaker as you leave. So that's a linear curved equation. But clearly velocity for light is not a linear or curved equation. And Einstein made it that. So I'm just saying that Einstein, because of his relativity, he put the light in the gravity for twice as long. So I mean, but that's the only reason why that works. So I'm just saying that wasn't proven. So that was the whole thing Einstein was getting proven right about, was that yes, there's lensing, and it's because of relativity.
So you'll agree, though, that we've got the classical equations, and we're asking ourselves that does the evidence match the classical equations?
And the classical equations are written for fucking material bodies. We haven't established that a photon is matter. A photon is energy. Energy isn't affected by gravity. Matter is. So if it's a swirl of photons, it's gravitational, like an electron or a proton or a neutron. If it's a single piece of energy, it's not affected by gravity. They're two different things. So using material equations and applying them to photons, in my opinion, is mistake number one. And then there's a bunch of mistakes after that, but that's the first mistake, is when physics sits there and applies. It's like the famous equations. What's the guy with the famous? The famous Maxwell equations. They apply Maxwell's equations to a photon. It's totally inappropriate. Maxwell's equations only apply to a charged body. Photons aren't charged, for fuck's sake.
I'm not sure how you answered my question, though, or where it leaves, or more specifically, where it...
The point is that I'm talking about the evidence, okay? So what I'm saying, until you got some evidence, I don't give a fuck what your equation says, because it's irrelevant. Your equation...
That's what science is.
No, it isn't. You're declaring a photon a material body and saying you're right to do that. I'm saying you had no right to do that in the first place. I don't have to consider a fucking photon a planet. It's not a planet. It's a body that can't change its speed, that's going the maximum speed in the universe. And as I pointed out, in a black hole, where's your equation there? Because all your equations blow the fuck up because you can't make it go faster. So where's your conservation of energy when the photon is heading for the black hole and it doesn't go any faster? What the fuck does it do then? Your equation blows up. You can't use Maxwell's equation. You can't use fucking Newton's equations. None of these equations apply to a photon because it doesn't go any fucking faster.
If you'll allow me a moment, is it not fair to say that science makes an equation and then it asks itself, is that equation valid, by looking whether the predictions the equation makes is seen as evidence? That's all I was asking. Just trying to establish some groundwork.
There, but it's the wrong equation. You can't. This doesn't prove the equation invalid on planets if it doesn't apply to photons. Trying to apply the equation to the photon, I'll just say it again, is mistake number one. Because a photon isn't a planet.
Well, you're not recognizing it. You're arguing. I'm trying to find some groundwork of agreement in general, and you're still arguing at me as though I'm arguing particulars. I want to just check that we're in agreement on some groundwork. Sometimes that generally applies.
Okay,
I'm not saying anything about. I've not said anything about photons. I've not said anything.
We can't do it. You're telling me I have to accept your premise, okay, that your equation applies to photons, and if I don't accept that premise, you're going to sit there and say, I've crossed the line. I've done something illegitimate. I'm saying I don't accept that premise. There's no evidence that a photon is a planet. There's no evidence that the equation should apply to a fucking photon. And because I say that, you're telling me I'm violating the fact that the moon obeys. The moon will obey. The Earth will obey. Okay? A photon does not obey.
please give me a quote where I've said anything like that.
Well, you're just saying right now. You're telling me I have to deal with this equation.
I've not
Why
told
do I have to deal with this fucking equation?
Quote me. How did I tell you this?
Equation
How did I insist any of this?
Light. Where do you have a light gravity equation? Where do you have it? Show me that equation.
No, tell me how you think I've insisted on something. What did I say?
You just did. You said, do we have agreement? Isn't that insisting? I'm
No.
saying, no, we don't have agreement. With the premise is, I don't think the equation applies. I don't accept the premise that it applies. I don't accept any premise that says I have to do anything with this stupid fucking equation when it comes to photons. It has nothing to do with photons.
Right. Forget about photons, forget about gravity. I asked you a question which was a general question.
Try again, because I couldn't see how photons and gravity weren't part of the question when the equations are
my question is
about gravity.
My question is forgetting all that, in general, does science make an equation about anything and then look for the evidence that that equation predicts and asks itself whether it matches?
Obviously it doesn't, because obviously that's not what science is doing right now. That's my
theory or the philosophy.
That's what they're not doing.
That's what they're supposed to do.
Well, yeah, I would agree. That's right. You don't convict until you have fucking evidence. That's right. You don't go into the trial with a presumption and then look for the evidence. No, you go into the trial and listen to the evidence and then draw a conclusion. So you don't walk in with a conclusion and then try to prove the conclusion. They've walked into the trial saying, yes, lensing happens, and now they're looking anywhere they can find it, and they're putting dark matter God goop on all of it.
So we're in agreement. So it's out of order for you to tell me I'm insisting that you about photons and a rant at me like that.
Again, our ability to communicate is almost as unlikely, okay, as lensing a 100-watt light bulb at 10 billion light years. I'm just saying, everything you say to me, yes, I'm hearing. All I keep hearing is you putting me at some obligation instead of putting Piro at it. Piro talks absolute motherfucking nonsense, and you're implying that there's some grain of truth to the crap he's spewing. There's no grain in the evidence. There's no grain in any theory. It's all a pile of fucking shit.
Well, I don't care. In a sense about Pyro's position.
Then quit critiquing arguments between me and Piro.
Right. No. The point is I thought he was seeing a position, and I held that position that I thought whether he does or doesn't, and I've explained what I was thinking, and it turns out we're in agreement. So as to yours and Pyro's general disagreement or whatever, I'm happy to have cleared up this density problem for myself, an issue with you, and I care not about Pyro's dispute with you or yours with his, and I care not.
Well, ask Dumbly. Is this fair cop?
No.
You've done everything but kiss Piro's ass, and you've done everything and imply, oh, see, Gary really is wrong. That's what you've done. Now you can say that's not your intention. Fine, I'll accept that. I really will. But don't tell me I'm fucking idiotic or something. I mean, don't insult my intelligence and say somehow you were fair copping me, because you didn't fair cop me.
Well, it certainly wasn't kissing Pyro's ass. It was a genuine thought that I thought, as the issue stood to me, that I took a position on, and I thought you was wrong on the position, and we've explained, and it seems we're in agreement. So it's a non-issue from here on in. If you want to,
non-issue.
I'm supposed to be.
Okay, fine. You're saying it's a non-issue. Will you bring it up to Piro then?
If I should like to discuss this density issue with Pyro and what he was talking about, and how that to my mind, you're also in agreement with Pyro on the density issue, not the wider lensing issues.
Is there any possibility, Numbly Num, that me and Piro are on agreement on any aspect of how gravity works in the real universe?
No, I mean, Piro doesn't even have a stable, solid position on anything, seemingly. He's all over the place.
Well, I think what we all agree on, and this was the point, is that if the sun shrunk down to a black hole, no orbits would change. And to that extent...
But I'm just saying that isn't the subject we were discussing, so of course...
Not the broad subject, but actually a clash on an issue.
I'm just saying, there was no clash there. There was no clash there. I mean, the fact that you thought I was implying that somehow... changing the size of something mattered was what I was talking about, has nothing to do with it. I'm talking about the fact that the gravitational field, okay, has to be defined, all right, by that r² number.
I've sort of wondered about, just with your theory, like if there'd be some kind of maximum amount of gravity that would be based on volume that was just due to...
Exactly. The universe has a maximum. There is a maximum in the universe, and when you create a body dense enough, what you end up doing is having zero gravity in the center, which means the atoms fall apart because they no longer have electricity or magnetism, because electricity and magnetism are made out of gravity. So the absence of gravity in the center of the body would mean it would have to supernova.
Okay. I've got about 15-20 minutes left before I have to get off. So if we could, for my purposes, we can. That's a non-issue, and we can park that. What would you?
I'm parting it. I'm saying you're giving me the honest impression that it wasn't your intention to be totally insulting to my intelligence and to imply I was fucked up and Piro was right. That wasn't your intention. Okay, fine. I'm accepting your description. All right. I'm just saying that it seems like it's a routine event, but go ahead. That's what happened. You didn't mean why Piro was right. Okay, got it.
What would be the next issue you'd like me to deal with then? I'll try to in the short time. What's the next issue we should discuss?
Well, you tell me what your complaints are, okay? I'm just saying, maybe you're willing to concede that the evidence for gravitational lensing, okay, doesn't support the conclusions that have been drawn. There isn't enough evidence to convict on this subject. Maybe you concede that. If you don't concede that, then this issue still can be discussed, because somewhere you're seeing a grain of evidence here that I'm not seeing. I don't see a single grain of evidence. Not that there's insufficient evidence. There's zero rational evidence. There's zero evidence consistent with scientific procedure. The Edinburgh experiment hasn't been repeated. The most famous experiment hasn't even been repeated successfully. They haven't used the Hubble, and every single one of their galactic photographs has huge glaring flaws.
Right. Well, here's how I see it then. All right. I see the scientists out there telling me they have these equations. These equations predict lensing, and the evidence that matches those equations to some degree of accuracy confirms as a prediction, as support for those equations. Right, let me just finish one last sentence. It seems to me that I can't refute those scientists saying that evidence supports these equations unless I can get those equations in my hands and actually put the calculations in and double check and confirm. So as to whether it's strong evidence or not, I'm only listening to the scientific community.
Can I
apply the equations? As soon as they go realistically try to apply the equations, they have to create dark matter. So they've never been able to apply the equations because they have to apply dark matter, and dark matter is fudge. That means you can make as much or as little as you need. So they just apply it like putty anywhere they need it, and they don't then apply the equations to figure out why this galaxy hasn't collapsed. They put the dark matter in to justify the lensing, okay? If you actually put it in there and then applied other equations to describe what happens to that galaxy tomorrow, that galaxy collapses because of the gravity they just introduced into it, okay? So this is all bullshit. You don't want to admit that it's bullshit? Fine. I think it's I think it's just beyond credulity for an honest person to evaluate this evidence and not admit what's happening, which is this is just chicanery. This is just shenanigans. They're shenaniganing the fuck out of physics. Huygens is shenanigans. This fucking dark matter is shenanigans. The fact that they didn't repeat Einstein's experiment, especially on his 100th birthday, is shenanigans.
Let me just say one thing here, okay?
Sure.
It's also, they're claiming that dark matter makes up 85% of the mass of galaxies. So they've got 15% of the mass that would be necessary to create the effect they're seeing. It's not like 2 or 3% margin. It's 85 fucking percent.
Yeah,
It's ridiculous.
There's 7 orders of magnitude insufficient mass to justify what they're stating the equations say. So they need 7 times, okay, the reality to make it work.
Right.
It's
So
crazy.
can I just say, right, what I said earlier, right? I understand, and it's troublesome for me as well. This seeming way science works, in terms of, I mean, in the past they might twink a theory, but this mass introduction of extra things so the theory fits is troublesome. But you still have, on the one hand, the scientists saying these equations, if we imagine that out there is more than what we see, right? That's the assumption and the proviso, then this phenomenon
It's like arguing with a God believer then, right? God believers will do exactly the same thing. They'll just say God made the giraffe's neck longer. Then I'll bring up hippopotamuses and they'll say God did it. And then I'll go to dolphins and I'll talk about their hip bone and they'll say God did it. They'll every time, if I dispute the dark matter as being legitimate, they'll just come up with some other dark crap, okay, some other bullshit. I'm just explaining to you how the dark matter doesn't even work because they spread it unevenly, okay? Get this, right? It's not that it's 85% off, because if you really look at what they're doing, it's 850% off, because when they apply the dark matter, they apply it in clumps. They put a clump of it here, a clump of it there, right where they need it. Okay, and so that's even more of an argument of, isn't this grotesque convenience? We'll just put the dark matter where we need it.
So I have a concession.
By any standard, that is just not acceptable.
I have a concession.
On life support, the whole theory.
The men don't want to hear this concession, all right? So I'll concede that insofar as that it's a reasonable rejection to say, you know, your equations are full of shit because I am not prepared to accept, you know, this insertion of dark matter to make your theory fit. Yeah,
the word dark matter is meaningless on top of it. It doesn't refer to anything. There's no theory, no hypothesis.
I'll point out also that it's not the only criticism. As I just pointed out, I don't think they can justify the brightness of the smear versus the distance of the object. I don't think they could collect that much light in the lens. The lens, they have to calculate the total amount of light. Each photon has to be bent by the lens. The lens cannot, from that distance, collect enough light to be that bright.
A quick change of direction for you is on a similar thing, actually, but I'd like to hear your thoughts. Do you know about inflation theory? How they did the same thing with inflation theory and the Big Bang theory. Right.
Well, I don't know if I want to discuss something that's so made up. They just pick a day and say on day 25 it inflated 4 million%. Well, that's very convenient.
Yeah. But they had to do that because they were stuck. The theory didn't work without doing that, and then it says, oh yeah, within a fraction of a second, the thing just like...
They didn't have to do it. They could have just been honest about it and said, shit, our stuff's theory is falling apart here. We got to rewind.
I mean...
Well, they could have pointed out that it's probably a complex dynamic because all I have to do is put a crust on the Big Bang, and then I can start explaining the universe because there was a crust, because there wasn't all one thing. I mean, they're trying to make a Big Bang out of a plasma, and, you know, that's almost, in my opinion, it's impossible because if you really think about it, there'd be no way for anything to gravitationally pull into itself because it's doing the R² thing again. The stuff is going further away from each other than its gravity could pull it together. So there's no way. It's like making the light from a light bulb collapse and then show up at you. You know what I mean? Where I see two photons come off the light bulb in an arc and crash into my eyes. We know that ain't going to happen. And that's their big brain problem. They can't possibly force stuff to shoot out that fast and somehow curve into each other.
To me, saying that the universe got so big so quickly amounts to, you might as well say, why think about beyond that point? The universe just started this big.
You really, you know what? If you really look into these theories, you'll find they're just all like dark matter and dark energy.
I'm just saying,
you find lots of problems in there. It's all bullshit.
Everybody's critiquing me because I don't have math, and I'm just saying every time I analyze their math, you find a Huygens. Every time you pick at anything they do, even Einstein, you find that they are injecting a constant to balance the equation, or they shove an irrational number in there so they have a blow-up switch so they can blow the whole equation up because it's going to get irrational any minute. So, I mean, they have all these engineered devices popped into these equations to make them so they're going to somehow be able to wear the dress on Monday night and be clean-shaven enough to look like a woman, and then they'll look like a man over here, and they'll do this over there, and there'll be a 5-year-old boy over here. I mean, they're totally turned these equations into transformers. I can make this do anything, right? I can do anything equations, and they're useless because of that. Let me just bring up one point to you about Maxwell's equations and why I'm saying this is a big mistake. The whole wave function idea of a photon, there's no real evidence that it contains any magnetism or electricity or any of this crap. The only way it ever expresses any of these effects is when it interacts with an electron. So here they are saying, okay, Maxwell's equations apply to photons. Well, the only way you can see them expressed in a photon is when they interact with an electron. So clearly Maxwell's equations apply to the electron, and the whole point is when the photon hits the electron is when you can start doing the Maxwell equation. You can't do the Maxwell equation until the photon hits the frickin' electron. So why are we applying Maxwell's equations to the behavior of the frickin' photon when it's never expressed until the photon hits an electron?
I'll have to revise my Maxwell equations.
It's the field.
I don't know a lot of the maths.
I just mean the field part. I mean, I think you do know that there's absolutely no reason to believe that photons create fields. I'm just saying there's no perpendicular fields being animated by an electron when it moves, and that you can't possibly accelerate an electron. So clearly it can't be it can't be an accelerating charge because you can't accelerate it.
You know, I don't like the idea of fields anyway, and that's what they say light is, and I have problems with the Maxwell equations on those bases. But the Maxwell equations are quite funny because you can come at them from two angles, and the history is interesting in terms of, and the fact that they come from the idea of waggling an electron and such forths and all that. But let me just say this.
I don't have anything to say this.
Do you hear that? Let me finish. Let me say this. As far as fields are concerned, I think fundamental physics and the vast population are kind of in agreement with Carroll that that's what the world is fields. And I think this is like when you're right and you're saying if you scrutinize the maths, ultimately you end up pulling down the trousers of any theorist that's in front of you, and that is because as Feynman said, when he's trying to explain the attraction of magnets, he starts talking about rubber bands, and he said, if I said it was like rubber bands, but then you'd ask, well, how does the rubber band work? And you'd say, well, the rubber band works because it's got rubber bands. Well, when you talk about a field with some value in space here and some other value in space here, the physics is saying this value changes as if they're connected by a rubber band because this one changed. So Feynman laughs and says, and you'd understand how ridiculous that would be if I explain a rubber band how it works in terms of rubber bands. Well, that's the final pulling down of the pants of the physicist.
I understand, but he also says in that same, metaphorical, poetic description, I think he actually says the word virtual photon is a force carrier. I think he says the word at least force carrier, okay? So when you have a force carrier, then you have a legitimate field, right? If you have an actual carrier, you have a legitimate field.
Well, there's where I got onto the nonsense of the virtual particle world. Is Feynman, not Feynman, Leonard Susskind in one of his lectures, he was drawing these photons coming out of the virtual field and then coming back into it because within a certain time. And I asked myself, hang on. Photons travel in straight lines. Why would it? And the point was that I eventually assimilated is that it's just a mathematical trick to imagine all these things. They're not really traveling in and out. They're just assuming that effectively if one came out, then eventually one would go back to replace it and stuff. And it's
exactly my point. Exactly my point. They're poorly illustrating exactly my theory. So I'm saying I don't agree with virtual photons. I agree with actual ones, and they've misidentified them and just haven't pointed out that they're gravity. They're just gravity in a form, okay, where you have no electron that can see it. The electron can only see it by gravitationally affecting it, and that effect is always going to be balanced in 99.99 of cases, right? So it's only when something's accelerating that it's not balanced, and that's exactly when we have the commensurate field that pops out of the electron. So there's no coincidence, right? I mean, you accelerate the electron, it starts polarizing the gravity. It's the same force that always existed. You've just made it noticeable now because you've polarized it.
Right. So, before I go, will you concede that the establishment of physics at the moment, they say there is evidence for what they're saying, and what they're saying is got all these fantastical assumptions.
All right. Well, I'll only concede that if you'll concede that every physics documentary that says the word quantum and talks about the two-slit experiment lies about the single-slit experiment. So if you'll concede that they perpetually and consistently lie about the single-slit experiment, I'll concede your point, that that's what they believe. Because I'm going to say they have no credibility. They don't know what single-slit interference is, so right there, their credibility is zero. Because it's a fundamental phenomenon. What slit the fucking photon went through is the most irrelevant question you could possibly ask in the goddamn universe, because guess what? There's a thing called single-slit interference, and until you explain that, it just doesn't matter what fucking slit it went through, because guess what? When it's going through one slit, it's creating interference.
No, you're right. It's this conversation that I've been watching you have and put forward on your Draft Science. It relates to the idea that there's something unnatural and unintuitive about trying to say about a field and this single slit. Because let me explain in this respect. I think it brings out what I seem to remember the definition of a fluid being something that completely fills the container that it's in, right? Now, that being the case, if it was a fluid, there would be no reason why this waving, like when we close the gap and it gets beyond shorter than this wavelength, if it really was fluid-like water waves, the frequency would have nothing to do with it. You understand? If you had a wave pool, and with a hole in it, you wave it, and the frequency will always go through it by definition of fluid. And I think it would be a reasonable proposition to say I'm only going to allow anything the property of wave phenomena if it's like a fluid. And to me,
Well, I'd only use it.
Ah.
I'd certainly say that it's another one of these mistake number one things. Okay, to apply a word wave that describes force migration through a medium, right? Always through a medium, and apply that to photons. Okay, I mean this just does seem a little bit like you're saying there's an ether. Then you're saying there's some other thing. That's what that's what they invent with Copenhagen, right? Essentially, it's the ether because they're saying the photon gives off a vibration that it bounces off the surface and then it decides where to go. It's essentially got radar. Well, where's the radar going? What's it going through? It has to be going through an ether. Right? I mean, a photon can't be creating photons, right? It's not. We know the photon isn't creating virtual photons, right? That wouldn't make any sense, would it?
I don't know, but they are saying that ether is not material in nature. It's only numbers in nature.
Well, it doesn't matter. I'm just saying the point is that they have now really broken the concept because now they're really in the dark matter realm where they're not going to be able to come up with any consistency for this ether because now their ether is going to create the same problems the old ether did, which is why isn't there any friction when the planet flies through the ether? Why isn't there any friction when the sun supernovas? Why isn't there any friction when the frickin' Big Bang happened? Where was the ether then?
I gotta go.
Yeah.
See, I think we can communicate occasionally.
Well, yeah, I'm saying we're still talking to each other after years of this crap, but I'm just saying that, I'm just trying to tell you that, yeah, we definitely have a personality conflict because I just feel like every time you turn your eyes to my focus, it seems like you have a completely different focus. It's like you got little red eyes and you got a creased forehead, and when you turn it to some other asshole's bullshit, you're like, oh yeah, well that's an interesting theory, and yeah, that's really kind of conceptually, I get that. I certainly totally understand. I feel you on that whole idea, and so I'm just saying that's how I'm feeling it.
I understand that because I like to say me and Amanda are friends. Yeah, I'm friendly but we don't talk as much as we used, and there may be a bit of truth in what you're saying, but it's not intentional in that respect.
Well, I'm accepting that, right? I'm saying to you, I sort of get that. Okay, you're not trying to be a jackass, but you're just jumping on the bandwagon that seems to think it's okay to just run over and mend them. Yeah, it's fun. Let's run over and mend them. Yeah, that's fun. Let's do that. Let's throw shit at him. Let's piss on his head. I mean, everybody seems to think that's a great entertainment. I don't find it all that fucking entertaining. I'm sick of cleaning the shit off my head.
Well, you'll know when I'm trying to run over and mend them because I'll be annoyed with you and I'll swear and I'll call you stupid and I'll do other things like that. And if I'm not doing anything like that, then I'm actually usually trying to be genuinely serious. But
like I said, I accept that we just have a problem communicating, and sometimes we're talking cross purposes, as you say. We get cross purposed a lot. Okay, so yeah, this whole argument was a giant cross purpose because somehow you thought I was presuming something that is kind of silly. So yeah, I'm sorry you assumed I was stupid. I'm not stupid.
Right. See you later. I'm going to get off and do something.
Go pull the rocks out of the dog poo. Okay. So Numbly, you're patient there, Numbly.
Well, it's early in the morning. Just sort of getting my brain going.
Oh yeah, I know. It's still, like I'm just saying though. It still seems like, jeez, I would have interrupted long before now.
Yeah, I couldn't get in there. But I was thinking I think that it's really important actually to attack this dark matter thing because it's the worst piece. It's the weakest point in their whole thing. And if they drop it, the whole thing goes down, And it's so easy to just chop it apart.
Well, I don't think the whole thing goes down just because I don't even think Piero's using dark matter. He's using fudgy make-believe. Well, that's what they told me. I mean, Piero just keeps saying that's what they told me. So as long as every physicist can just say, well, Einstein told me, or, well, Professor Susskind says, as long as they can keep doing that, they got an out, right? So
I think he's kind of in this like create your own reality paradigm thing, right? Where it's just like, he'll just defend one kind of argument one day and then defend a different kind. Like he's defended dark matter with me a couple times in his room, like vehemently defended the dark matter thing. But then when he's talking to you about the lensing, it's like he's not even including that in his argument, which is just weird. It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah,
so I don't know. He doesn't make sense.
Well, yeah, and he doesn't make any sense, and nobody calls him on it. It's just, it's incredible. I mean, how the fuck can you have a conversation when people are allowed to have totally outrageous premises? Yes, the 3 bears do eat porridge.
Yeah, I was listening.
I have evidence. We have this photograph of, 2 watermelons and a frog. Isn't that good enough evidence of the 3 bears eating porridge? I mean, isn't a frog and 2 watermelons in the same picture proof that bears eat porridge?
Yeah, I don't get it with him. I don't really get what he's trying to accomplish by even talking about physics, actually. I was listening back to some of the black hole chat that I had with him a few months ago because I just was thinking about that. And man, he just,
Pirro has no real knowledge, right? I mean, I can read it now anyway.
Yeah.
What Pirro does is he hears a word, he goes to Wikipedia, he reads 4 sentences, and now he's an expert.
Yeah.
He never reads anything all the way through. Never doesn't have any complete knowledge on any subject. So yes, he has a little piece of knowledge about a lot of little stupid things, but he doesn't have anything that's called a complete theory.
He seems kind of dumb to me, to be honest. Like, I don't
want to call him dumb, but I'm just saying he does seem to know what the words are. But I'm just mean that shit, he has some of the vocabulary. Well, he doesn't even have the vocabulary, but yeah, sometimes he just says things. Well, when the slit cast a shadow on the, what is slit cast a shadow?
I think he just kind of like.
Can't we even get that concept right? That slits don't cast shadows.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I think maybe he's just too comfortable with the idea that he's smart, and so he doesn't have to really work at it. He doesn't have to do any of the research.
Well, all I'm just saying is that, in the last 4 years, I have put in, 1,000 times more hours listening and reading than this fucker has on physics. I mean, there's just no way. And the stuff he's reading is all the wacky crap, I mean, I could just see him going to the physics page and trying to find the wackiest shit being talked about and go in there because that's all he cares about is something wacky. It has to have wacky factor. If it doesn't have wacky factor, if it doesn't have lots of feathers and lots of wings, he's not going to bother with it.
Yeah, it's like science fiction or something.
Yeah,
I really see that it's kind of turned into entertainment on some level as well, right? Like if you just look up black holes on YouTube or on Google or something, you'll just see like tens of thousands of articles and videos and shit that are all just directed at people, black holes are going to gobble up the universe.
Well, not the simulations, but the simulations are so funny because I thought about those simulations, the Blender simulations.
Yeah.
They take the star field and then they actually run a Blender image over the star field. They actually do. And you're just saying, well, why has Pirro not seen that the lensing has to happen on the surface of the black hole? The lensing isn't happening somewhere else. It's happening where the strongest gravity is. Duh. I mean, gee. So somehow I'm still wrong. I mean, in spite of, that's there. It's this huge piece of evidence that lensing happens around the surface of the gravity, and yet I'm somehow still wrong.
Yeah, it's like the whole thing's falling into the clutches of 3D graphics animators.
Yeah, but it is that bad. I mean, like I said, the first argument we had about the stupid single slit, and he said, there is interference in the single slit in water waves. And then he popped up an image that I had already seen, a silly animation that was created by 3 sources. And
that discussion, I just felt like, Jesus Christ, like he just doesn't, I don't think he has any positions really. Like he's just skating around, in this kind of vague hearsay theory.
Well, I think he has an underlying theory, but I think it's totally woo-woo bullshit. He thinks everything is spiritually connected and there is some sort of faster than light. Everything's connected. My penis is tied to your eyeball and we're all blah, 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 blah. And it's just such a crock of fucking goddamn woo. But people can't live without it. I mean, religion, you can't kill religion. And
I think he's into the
fucking religion.
Yeah, or it's kind of just like I say, entertainment. It's like an entertainment religion cult. Like, how some people are about TV shows and bullshit like that, where they're just just too obsessed with it, too involved mentally.
I know, but they've turned into, you know, My Little Pony. This isn't.
Yeah.
This is not. This is.
I mean, I think Puro has
entertainment for fucking people who like to watch glitter on a piece of paper. I mean,
I think Puro, it's just like he just loves, you know, it's just his he can't make the distinction anymore or something. Because I kind of see you guys as being like really opposite in a certain way, like as in you're sort of defined by your seriousness, and he's defined by his lack of seriousness, his lack of ability to even visit a seriousness state of mind ever. Like he's kind of just out of touch with that idea.
Well, he's out of touch with the idea that there's a reality to be described.
Yeah, right.
He just figures that everybody's making up their own movie or something. I mean, he has some, you know, bullshit, some Nietzschean crap that we're all just, you know, Kantian Nietzsche and whatever you want to call that bastard child, that we're just sitting here making the universe as we're perceiving it. Somehow perception has something to do with reality. So yeah, it's just totally anti-Einstein. He's definitely a Bohrite.
Yeah, it's strange. It's strange listening to him argue.
That's sort of a good conflict. In a way, that's a good parallel, because it's exactly the kind of conflict that existed between Bohr and Einstein. I mean, Bohr was the universe is what we make it, and, you know, Einstein was, there's got to be a way to tickle this thing so we can figure out what it's made out of.
Yeah. Yeah, today I was looking into the paper that the guy wrote, The Determination of Deflection of Light by the Sun's Gravitational Field. It was the one that the guy made in 1919, the Albert Einstein's buddy or whatever.
Right.
And you know, reading his conclusions, it's actually a really well-written paper. Like, it's readable. It's kind of written in conversational English. And he doesn't even endorse it. He's like, I wouldn't trust this without a few more confirmations, because it's like they did it on a boat on a cloudy day, and there was like temperature stuff, and these are like, you know, 10 to 30 second exposures, and the guy's like expressing these concerns about being on a boat, and just these sort of like, and then they weren't able to do the to take the test images that you would
right, exactly, the cloudy days and you know, all this stuff. I mean, there was so many issues they have to overcome to get these images. And they're all based on some kind of calculation that they know where that star is supposed to be.
But the guy himself was kind of honest. He was pretty forthcoming. He's like, I don't endorse this. He's like, you know, don't take this. Like, he's kind of excited. He's like, you know, I want to say that, you know, I think this is pretty much like, this is good for Einstein, but he's like.
Let me just put it this way, though, that, yeah, okay, maybe that's how he wrote the paper. But obviously the propaganda that went with the paper, that wasn't what he was telling the newspapers, and it certainly wasn't what Einstein was saying. So they're both applauding the fact that they've proven something. So it wasn't like the world was unwittingly deceived. They were quite wittingly deceived in the sense that Einstein didn't say, wait a minute, slow down, we don't have nearly enough evidence to draw any conclusions. He didn't do any of that shit, and certainly this guy didn't do any of that shit. They were all just applauding the fact that, hey, we got these other guys to go along with our bullshit. Because that's the other funny part, right? Is the other guy did the same experiment from a different location, and he found his results to be totally inconclusive.
Yeah. They probably just got swept away in the whole hype of it.
I'm just saying. So yeah, they convinced him to agree that, okay, I guess if I sort of squint hard at my math, I can make it work. Sure. Okay, let's go for it.
But I guess he wrote this paper like before all that excitement had happened, right? Like the excitement was a product of the paper, but actually, you know, I've never really looked into this guy at all before. So my experience of it is just reading this paper and what this guy said. And there is a measure of humility in the paper itself.
Right,
like, right. He doesn't seem like a total asshole.
I know I've read some of that. You know, I know I've read his paper of his documentation of his experiment, so I was aware of all the problems he was having doing this. But every one of the people that tried to do it have had huge problems, because it's really difficult, right? Taking time exposures where you have to have a precise, you know, you can't jiggle the camera, and you know, everything has to be exactly the right size, and you're doing this on stupid plates, you know, and the plates have to be perfectly temperature wise and all this bullshit for any of this shit to work. So yeah, it's really difficult.
And it's a one-off thing too. It's not like this guy was more of like, you know, a gentleman adventurer type guy. He wasn't like experienced with taking these kind of measurements on a he didn't have a team. It was him and some non-scientist guy assisting him in doing it, and just some regular people, and there was just not enough controls.
Right? Isn't this? It's just kind of funny that this is how they say Einstein was proven correct on relativity, right? All of relativity hinged on Einstein making this correct prediction. And ironically, the prediction really doesn't have a damn thing to do with relativity, right? But this proved relativity. That's, this proved there was bent space. This proved time dilation. This proved, all of that came with Einstein was proven by something that doesn't even matter. That's all like I said, I think Einstein just said there's a 50-50 chance, right? I'll say, yes, photons can be bent by gravity. Photons can't be bent by gravity. 50-50, I'll go with yes, they can.
Yeah. Yeah, and even the image that the guy made, like there's a copy of it, it's shown in this paper along with this paper, and it's like I can't see anything. Like I'm
just saying that's how tiny this diffraction is, and like I said, it's all dependent on their having a rock solid knowledge of exactly where the star should have been.
Yeah, I don't even know what they're seeing looking at it. I can't see anything about it that would it just seems like a circle with some like puff around it. Like I really can't.
No, it is. It's just a star, but it's and they're negatives. You know what I mean? So they're backward photos. So you see a black thing on a white field. But yeah, the black thing is a tiny fraction where it shouldn't be. That's the argument. If you take the two photos and superimpose them, I don't know. There's a tiny difference between where they saw it and where it should have been.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's all dependent on them saying that they took the photo at the right time. If they took the photo at the wrong time by a few milliseconds, the whole thing is shit.
Yeah, and then they ended up taking their control sample photographs, it's some kind of like the normal situation when it's not the eclipse or whatever. Like they couldn't take them at the time because it immediately clouded over again after they shot them. So they did them in a different month when the stars were positioned differently, and it's just it's so sloppy.
And the whole thing. So when the guys who did it in 1956, the funny thing is like their test photos. This is how bad their experiment really was that there should have been 1,000 stars on their plate, and there were 80. So that's how bad the resolution was, right? Instead of 1,000 stars, there were 80. And they still did the experiment. Typing, yes, very good. I'm not sure of the year, so don't type in a year. But somewhere in the 50s they did it, and somewhere in the 70s another group did it, and both of them had problems. They got something wrong. They put the pictures were out of focus, or some other bullshit went wrong. But I'd still argue, like I said, that Hubble can do it every fucking day. Every day Hubble can just follow the sun and watch everything get all distorted right behind the sun. It should be able to do it every day. It should be able to see the entire universe as it goes past the sun. It should be able to watch every single lit object diffract. If gravitational lensing is real, if it meets Einstein's equations, if that's true, then they should be able to see it all the time around the edge of the sun. Just like a black hole. They should see the universe swirling around the sun. But it's not true. That's why they don't have the picture of it. Physics sucks. It's made up crap by a bunch of science popes. Yeah, you joined the call. That's weird. You were already in the call, and now you joined it.
Oh, well, there goes the old me.
Yeah, I guess so. Or maybe it was the, whatever they call that, the twin photon-y thing.
Going through some double slits. Yeah. So I missed everything that you said. Since,
it's the anti-numbly numb. Coming to annihilate. No, I was just talking about how that they could use the sun right now with the Hubble and, just follow the sun, and they could swirl the entire universe right around the sun. I mean, it's just like a black hole, essentially. It should be doing exactly what a black hole does. Yes, it would be a thinner layer, but you know what I mean? It should be swirling the entire universe all the way around the sun. The sun should be diffracting every star that passes behind it every day right now. Right now, there should be a big swirl around the sun of the entire universe being distorted.
Right, and you'd think they would have at least got a couple of them or something, right? Like,
well, I'm just saying they have nothing, not zero.
Yeah, not nothing.
Zero, not even a repeat of Edinburgh's experiment with Hubble. I mean, absolutely nothing.
Yeah,
Why would absolutely nothing from Hubble regarding solar lensing?
If they managed to do it again too, you could celebrate it and get on all the newspaper.
Yeah, I'm just saying.
Somebody would be worth someone's while to do it, so you can be almost sure that if they could do it, someone would want to do it. It's not.
Yeah, they certainly want to sign their photograph. Yeah, you think for sure they could sell a book or something. So yeah, I mean, it seems like it would be a career helper.
Yeah,
to verify Einstein.
I think that it alone is almost pretty good
evidence
that it doesn't happen.
Yeah, well, if you add up that and the idea that none of these physicists know what single slit interference is, if you add up those two facts, you're basically, yes, okay, I'm almost like ready to accept a numbly numb conspiracy theory, because you're saying they can't be that stupid. I mean, they really can't be ignorant of both of these subjects. These people did go to college, didn't they? They have some kind of thinking apparatus where they can connect A plus B equals lying scum. They should be able to put that together.
Yeah, I guess I'm a little paranoid, but when I see these people talk sometimes, I just don't believe it. I just don't believe that they believe it. It just doesn't seem, they seem like actors or something. I don't know.
Well, they sure look like they believe it to me, and that's the part I just can't understand, is how can you possibly utter those words when you know single slit diffraction exists? How can you talk about that lensing shit when you know it's made out of dark matter, or it's an experiment that's never been repeated?
Yeah.
How can you say this shit to my face as if it's a fact when you haven't even come close to making it a fact?
I think for me, it's like, I never really had any commitment to the Einsteinian space model or anything. Like, I tried to look into physics, and then I just immediately was really put off by the whole dark matter thing. And I argued a bunch about that for a couple of years, and I don't know, but I didn't really understand all these other problems. But then when I was kind of primed to hear a different, better theory. And,
obviously, I spent my whole life being just too insecure to say I'm right and they're wrong. I was way too insecure to say that. Am I right in the sense that I was saying this doesn't make any sense, because I never bought into any of it, right? I mean, I never even bought into, the idea of calling it the electromagnetic spectrum when it's a frequency spectrum. It doesn't have anything to do with electricity or magnetism. It's photons, for fuck's sake. Radioactivity is not electric or fucking magnetic. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Cosmic rays aren't electric or magnetic. Why are they on this spectrum?
Yeah. I think the thing is like reading this paper, it's like, I always just try to go right for the source. Like if there's reports or tests and stuff, I always try to go right after the kind of main, the primary reading, the primary material and stuff like that. And then there's so many problems. It just seems like there's too many people involved. There is some kind of, they've pushed away this idea of like a competition of theories. They've tried to create this consensus thing.
Their elite clubism is stronger than any capacity to stand up and say the emperor's not wearing any clothes. So it's like a cliche, emperor's not wearing any clothes, because they're all living the nice life, right? They're all noblemen. And
there's no rivalry. There's no healthy rivalry.
No nobleman will walk up to, Degrassi Tyson and say, you're full of shit, So they won't do it, because if they tear down one, they know if I tear him down, they're going to tear me down, because I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about either.
Because maybe they feel like it's fragile for the money, right? Because the funding relies way too much on sensational media shit.
Well, we know that and the funding just relies on the fact that they can make some argument about some potentiality, you know, like almost like a Tesla or something. They're promising the death ray or whatever they're promising, and they can only make that theoretically possible if they keep their woo-woo alive.
Well, it's you know what? It's like communism. They don't think they're going to benefit from competition and, you know, rivalry. And like you kind of get the sense that in the past there was guys who would attack each other's theories, like when you read about Lesage and Newton and stuff, you know, where they were very combative, like, but, you know, I guess there was still there was a lot of territory that, you know, individual people could discover on their own still left at that time. I mean, it was the 1600s.
I think Lesage was much later, but I don't think Lesage was in Newton's time.
Okay, I don't know if if I have all that straight.
That's the first guy. See, the French guy, the guy who invented it. Lesage was a guy who energized the dead man's theory. So Lesage gravity really shouldn't be called Lesage gravity, because it's actually another guy who lived 100 years before Lesage who came up with it. So Lesage just went through his papers and grabbed all his shit and said, this is a great theory, I'm going to support it. So I'm not saying he was malicious, and I'm not saying he was a thief, but I'm just saying it is kind of unfortunate the guy who actually designed the theory is the guy whose name nobody knows.
Right. Well, that's probably
so is the original
more often than people think.
Yeah, he got Newton to go for it, and then they had a conflict because later Newton kind of said, "No, it's not going to work," and then the guy got really kind of pissed off. But it's all kind of a tragic story, of course, of somebody being right and nobody's listening to him. But I mean, he did have problems. I mean, the problem was it fit everything, but it did create this idea where people were thinking about it being meteors hitting. You know what I mean? Like hard things, and they were bouncing off and doing things, and that was the wrong impression, because then things break into pieces and all that kind of shit. And that's where it broke down, is that no one turned it into something non-friction, non-kinetic. I mean, it's not until completely kinetic. So until you turn into kinetic, it really doesn't make sense, because you end up with stuff bouncing around forever.
Well, they didn't have electricity, and they didn't even have like this. I think they were just building the first steam engines and shit back then. So
I just mean they didn't have a way of visualizing particles. In the pool ball sense. They really hadn't gotten to the pool ball analogy where they could really understand pure kinetics. And so they kept turning it into something that's too heat generating. Meteor hits Earth, well, that's going to make heat, that kind of thing.
Well, they didn't have like thermodynamics all figured out and things like that either, right? So I think coming to it now, it's like, a lot of the pieces are in place where you can make a much more clear definition of what the gravity particle.
Even now, though, they're, like I said, the debunkers are the same kind of thing. They're just, Kleiman was making the same arguments in the 60s that, it doesn't work because it's like rain, and when you run in the rain, you hit more rain. Right. So that was Kleiman's counter argument. And you're just like, well, what? You mean physics isn't about something other than drops of water?
Yeah, you're like, it's not 1690.
Yeah, you can't imagine something in a better analogy for physics than freaking water drops hitting me in an atmosphere.
Yeah, or also like if that's the only thing that is wrong with it that would need to get figured out, like that's very much worth pursuing compared with the shit they've got now where everything's wrong with it.
I'm saying it does everything else, right? It does your inverse square rule, it does your straight line force rule, it does everything else, right? Exactly. Why break it over this? Why don't you think about it a little bit? Because it didn't take me very long. Once I started thinking about it, I came up with the answer pretty quick.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a really, really strong theory, I have to say. I mean, I think that I was able to kind of come to it without I already didn't really give much credit to the establishment, right? So I think that what I hear with like Hythloday and Pyrrho and stuff is that it's just like the authority thing. Like they just can't imagine that you could be right over all the authority fuckers. Like they just like it's just like, how could that be? It's like it doesn't make fucking sense or something. But I don't know. To me, it doesn't. I wouldn't surprise me.
I'm just saying they should at least concede that I'm one fucking incredible genius to come up with a pile of bullshit that works so well.
I think
I mean, they should at least concede that, man, it is really hard to make a counter argument because, yeah, it does fit the observed facts.
Yeah. Well, I don't think Piero knows what your theory is, because every time I hear him talk about it,
I've made the accusation. He's never even read the paper.
or like watch the, even if you watch like say like the 5 best videos on Draft Science, I think you could get most of it. Or the basic.
I caught him on that because he started talking about it once, and it was like totally irrational to what I was saying. It wasn't even close, and he didn't even get that I had done the whole magnetism thing. I'm like, newsflash. I mean, I've explained magnetism, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you've kind of like changed it in this way where it's like, it would almost be like if you were going to build this theory up again as a new physics, it would be like you might even want to just build new terminology, because you can sort of just this integration of like inertia and gravity and things like that. It seems like there could be another language for it even.
Well, I've thought about it, but I mean, you really want to cling to words that people know, like the idea of a photon or something, so you can sort of play with those words. But yeah, it is difficult just because the word particle has already been so abused that, you don't have another word for a thing of discrete identity. What do I say? A thing of discrete identity.
Yeah, I think if enough people used it if enough serious people kind of were trying to apply themselves to it, that something would just come about naturally, as people.
Yeah, well, I was thinking of using something in the word fundamental, like a fundamentalite or a fundamentalite or something, some word where you'd understand that this is the fundamentalite and nothing else is a fundamentalite.
Yeah. There'd have to be a formalization of it eventually, right?
But so obvious when you go with the school of fish thing, and I know it just sounds silly to say fish, but I just mean it makes it so obvious. The school, not the fish, right? So I mean, it's really easy to understand the fish is conceptually entirely different than a school of fish, right? A school of fish has nothing in common with the fish.
Yeah. And why not, right? Why not?
You would never apply Maxwell's equations to the school and then apply the same equations to the fish. The fish aren't anything like the school. It's like
I like the school of fish thing. I think
cellular dynamics to a human being and saying that's what a human being is. No, the cells are completely in a completely different universe, essentially, than we are.
Yeah. I think when you use those metaphors, it actually does make it easier to think about it, and I don't see any problem with it. Why not? If it helps people comprehend.
Yeah, no, I mean, it gives the opposition an easy target. Is all I'm saying. Oh, I just got a fish story.
Yeah.
And you're like, yeah.
But they would just accept it if fucking Neil deGrasse Tyson said it.
Well, exactly. If anybody else on Earth said it, but in Mendham, even if you came up with it, you'd probably do better than me.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I think you have to be on TV or on some sort of, sanctioned authority channel.
Well, I just mean, I think the odds are that you'd have more people being supportive than ridicule-ish. So I'm just saying, that's all I'm saying. It's just that anything in Mendham is, already worthy of many downvotes. So, I can't do anything without somebody saying I did it wrong. So,
yeah, I think you are having trouble being heard for sure, because like I feel like I think I might be the only person who's at least like vocally, sort of supportive of this theory thing. But I mean, from my perspective, I'm just like, I've really tried to understand it.
Well, I think there's people who support it, but they don't feel. I mean, you happen to be somebody who does enough. What I'm saying. You have some background knowledge to make you competent to have the conversation, so you're not going to get tripped up. I think there's a lot of people who say, "Yeah, that sounds right, Gary," but they don't feel confident enough to argue it just because they don't really understand all this physics crap.
Yeah,
you have an underlying engineering understanding that's sufficient to make you quite lucid in describing the using the terminology. So you make a very good argument where I think most people who get it, who get the school analogy, who get the dancing analogy, who kind of understand what I'm saying, they just don't feel confident enough to defend it because they're not going to be able to do it deep enough.
Yeah, I don't blame them too, because it's like, look what happened. Like if I go and try to argue physics in one of those pure rooms, just everybody just treats you like people are asking me if I'm a flat earther. Like I'm trying to explain this shit to them, and they're asking me if I'm a flat earther, and I'm just like, for fuck's sake, I'm like, you're the flat earther, right?
Yeah, and then you end up sounding like some kind of conspiracy theorist or something else. And I don't mean to put you in that category, but yeah, that's what you end up being labeled as, because somehow you're claiming it's a conspiracy, or you're claiming
I don't even care.
You're saying they're all liars. You're saying this, you're saying that. Well, that's not really what I'm saying. What I'm saying is whatever the cause is, this is the effect. The effect is this is a mistrial. Okay, I don't care who caused it, but everybody's not on the subject. No one's looking in the right places at the evidence. So obviously this trial is fucked, because, this guy's on trial for murder, and you're driving Winnebagos into the room and saying, is it furnished properly?
Yeah, and have people looked around lately? People are liars. So why would it be that surprising if some fucking people were lying in physics? Like some of these things.
Yeah, like I said, I think the only ones I think that there's some astronomers who are really uncomfortable, because I don't know how they could possibly be comfortable with dark matter and these crappy lensing images. I just can't see how an astronomer who takes his job seriously could at all be comfortable with that. So these people they're just walking through their lives saying, I'm just going to mind my own business and take my damn pictures.
It's like an unspoken rule, I think, in the community.
They don't want to lose their jobs and all that kind of shit, but
Yeah, well, you're just supposed to support everybody, You're just supposed to support whatever, anything physics, right? But it's like, because really, like, there's a complete lack of rivalry and, like personalities that, and
I saw that with Dawkins, right? Because Dawkins was talking to some physicist, one of those snarky little weasels. What's his name? They're doing this little sit-down conversation thingy and blah blah blah. And so Dawkins is doing
talk or whatever.
Yeah, and they have a series. Like every year they show up and do this crap. But you can see when the guy was talking the physics bullshit, Dawkins, you could see his brain saying, you can almost see his brain going, how the fuck could that be true? You can almost see it, and he doesn't say that. He just says, wow, that's really fascinating, and blah, 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 blah. But you could almost see his brain going, I can't make a mental picture of that. That's just the silliest thing. Next to God shoving a dildo up my ass, I don't know what to do with that.
Yeah, he's saying, fuck, I'm glad I didn't go into physics.
Exactly, yeah. You could just see him saying, well, gee, yes, it is very theoretical, isn't it?
Yeah, because biology's in good shape, right? Because, it's all right here. We can all see and test.
Yeah, once in a while they put the wrong head on a dinosaur or something, but there's no really, really bad errors.
Yeah. And but yeah, like, I don't know, it just seems like the problem with a lot of this cosmology stuff particularly is like, I just think that the whole thing just has to be started again. Like I don't know, I don't accept it on the whole, the kind of cosmological theories like the Big Bang and all that stuff. I think that when the kind of fundamental theories are not sound, you can't even really build that stuff up properly, because little errors just turn into huge errors as you build up more and more stuff, like this dark matter.
I know, but even that, again, you're just saying, how much thought did people give this? Because they talk about how old the universe is based on how far away something is, and you're saying, well, you do realize that it had to take time for it to get there, right? And it can only travel the speed of light to get there. So the universe automatically, if you're seeing something 13 billion light years away, the universe automatically, if you believe in the Big Bang, you automatically, have a 26-year-old universe, because it had to take 13 billion years for the fucking thing to get there.
And then we're right in the middle. Like, yes, the other thing, we can see that far in all directions. So we just happen to be in the middle, or what's
I think the real age of the universe is, I think there was some kind of Big Bang, in the sense that I think that's what created the whole freaking pressure field. But but I think it exhausts at some point. Like we're in the ring, like on a nuclear bomb. We're in the ring, where of pressure that goes out. So like after the ring, there's no pressure. Before the ring, there's no pressure. But at the ring, there's pressure. So this is the gravitational part of the ring, and that's what we're in. But yeah, that ring is huge. So I mean, I'm saying that the age of the universe is probably like 5,000, billion years or something.
I think it's probably trillions of years.
I mean, there's some limitation you have to put on it because I think there's some logical conclusion regarding the whole thermodynamic issue. So I think there is a real issue to it exhausting because the photons are leaving. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I understand what you're saying. I think it's very hard to estimate, though. Like I don't see much basis for an estimate at this point.
Well, I'm just saying that I think it's realistic to say that photons aren't coming back. I mean, there's just no way you can pull them back. So the ones that are leaving are leaving. They're not coming back. So that is a thermodynamic problem.
Yeah, I agree with that. I see it as a pretty wide open question at the same time, though, and just in terms of the actual particulars and details. I think that those are things that need to be considered for sure. And I don't think they are considered in the way that they're modeling it now.
Talked about, which is, where you're just saying that, why are you saying this stuff when there's lots of room to go a lot deeper? And I never even heard a physicist ever say photons are leaving the universe. I've never heard that sentence spoke by any other person but me. I just happened. I mean, doesn't that occur to somebody that there's a bunch of photons going that way that aren't coming back?
Yeah. It's hard to imagine what's going on.
Yeah, I'm just saying it just seems like an obvious circumstance where you say, well, exactly what theory can I come up with that bends a photon all the way back into a 360-degree angle to come back here? It just doesn't make much sense to me.
Yeah, I think that if if the whole thing got rebuilt in a more solid way, because think about how long things have been going wrong with physics, right? It's like over 100 years. This thing's been off the rails for 100 years.
Exactly. It's a quantum, the Bohr. I blame it all on Bohr. I mean, Bohr's an asshole. I mean,
and then the Einstein paradigm too. Einstein's not even the worst, because you get the sense that he had some humility. Like he had some humility.
I thought that until I heard that God quote about the lensing thing, where he said something, in response to a reporter asked him, well, what if they didn't find lensing? And he said something like, well, then God would have been very unpleased because it's true or something, and I just thought, oh, that's so fucking arrogant.
Really? He said that?
Wow. Yeah. You see, he made one of his God comments, one of his rare little.
I thought he didn't believe in that.
Oh, well, I know, but I'm just saying that he made one of his God doesn't play dice with the universe statements. He made another God reference in response to the lensing thing. And I just thought that was really bogus for him to say, well, I certainly knew it was absolutely true or whatever, And it just seemed like, wow, but yeah, no, I mean, I can't, like I said, I hate, that everybody fell for this stupid bent space shit and the rest of it. I mean, it's just silly.
I think there's a cult of personality.
The whole idea of people not acknowledging, that somehow motion is relative and that it's not somehow absolute. I don't know how they can even make that make any sense. Well, you think it's relative when a photon flies 500 billion years across the fucking universe and pops into your eye, that the motion's relative? You think so? You think that's possible, that you're moving 300 million meters per second and you flew into a photon? Do you think that happened?
Well, I think Einstein's theory it's interesting as a time theory based on the idea of time dilation. But you could apply, your own theory of time dilation to it. It's just about the mechanics of things moving at different speeds.
Well, the idea was at least my theory made it obvious to me that it's just cryogenics, and I wish somebody would have just pointed that out. The time dilation isn't time dilation; it's cryogenics. You're just slowing the matter down. It's all slowing down.
Yeah,
the person doesn't live longer; he just lives slower. That's all. He doesn't go out into space and live He lived for 1 million years. No, he didn't.
It's just a map.
the same
The
amount.
map for the territory thing again with that, because it's like, why would they assume that time is changing and not the matter? Like,
yeah, well, exactly. Why wouldn't you? I mean, the whole thing of thinking that the clocks are unbreakable. I mean, what do you mean? That's kind of ironic because when I was a kid, I kept breaking. There was a clock on our mantle, and I was obsessed with it as a kid because I was like, how does that fucking clock know what time it is, and I don't know what time it is, right? So it was like an ego contest. Like, how can that clock be smarter than me? And so I kept trying to figure out how the clock worked, so I kept climbing up on the piano and I'd end up knocking the thing over and I'd break the glass, right? And so I did it like 3 times. I got in huge trouble and blah, 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 blah. And it's all expensive and terrible, terrible, terrible. But it's just kind of funny that I was obsessed with that whole idea of time. How does a clock tell time?
yeah.
And as we know, it tells it in a stupid, clunky, mechanical way, that's totally subject to how thick the syrup is I pour on the gears.
Yeah. It's funny because clocks weren't even really kind of brought to the, relative stability until fairly recently. It wasn't until the early 1800s or something that they had a really reliable clock that they could use for navigation purposes.
Yeah, that wouldn't wear out. The parts would grind down. The whole idea of having to put crystals in them and all the rest of it, because
that was the crystal thing. Yeah,
the gears would get glunky, so you had to use something that wouldn't get glunky.
Well, it was just building a clock that would run steadily for like 2 or 3 months at sea, right? So that they could navigate by the stars, because they had to use the dead reckoning method until they had really solid clocks on boats.
Yeah, it is. It is a fact. Well, they still could. Yeah, they didn't have to. Obviously, every day they could figure out what time it is again. So if they had to reset the clock, they could.
Well, no, it would get out of if it got off.
If as long as they knew their position. I'm just saying, if you were on the coast of Africa or something, you knew where you were, you could set your clock. But I'm just saying, otherwise, you were fucked. So
they had to just do latitudinal navigation basically, and then just hit, know what coast they were headed to, and then go down it. But then,
I'm just saying they'd have to wait till they went to somewhere where they knew where they were.
Yeah. But yeah, so I don't know. Einstein's theory, to me, I like to think about it, but I don't accept it at all. I don't think it's a field theory. I think that just the word relativity itself just tells you it's not a field theory. It's not I
just mean I don't like that. I hate it because it's like time is not a fucking dimension; it's a function.
Right.
It's silly.
It's a good map of that function. It's a good description of the function.
What do you mean? Where is this dimension? Is it over? Where the fuck is it? How do you show? Is it a square? Is it a circle? What the fuck is this crap? Dimension. What is this? What is this fucking word even mean?
It's a very abused word, isn't it?
I mean, it's just so fucking bullshit. It's like, no, there's no fucking other dimensions, jackasses.
Yeah, it's funny because like when I was a kid, the show Ninja Turtles was really popular, and the kind of evil villain guy was from Dimension X. And so in my generation of people, it's like this idea of a dimension being anything is like very acceptable to people's minds in a way, right? Like they're just prepared to be like, this dimension, that dimension, but I don't know, the whole thing is just slips by too easily because people have no clue where that word comes from or what a dimension really represents.
Yeah, I mean, they had the 5th dimension when I was a kid, some sort of, dancing fellows. But yeah, sorry. I mean, this idea of creating dimensions I just couldn't make anything out of that at all. So, I hate Einstein for this, creating 2 fucking bizarre dimensions, this fucking space dimension. Space is a dimension? What? What do you mean space is a dimension?
Right.
And it tells matter what to do. What? It tells matter what. How does it do that? The nothing is pushing the something. Oh, okay. Yeah. Sure. Why not? That makes sense. Nothing.
Well, remember, I was saying they describe the gravity thing like you're saying like the cosmic spandex or whatever, right? Like, and they put they're like when they're describing a black hole, it's like the mass is so dense that you kind of get these like vertical kind of planes that form, in the cosmic spandex. The thing's so way down, the things become vertical, right? And I'm like, well, what happens when you put that into 3D? So you have like, how does that work in all directions? That's ridiculous.
You can't even possibly turn it into a 3D model without making it rubber bands, right? You have to pull everything into the center. So how does?
But the opposite side is gonna. Where is it going? It just doesn't like.
I'm just saying, yeah, you end up with a fucking thing that just pulls and it never farts.
So it only makes sense in 2 dimensions, really, and it doesn't make sense even like that because they're using gravity to describe gravity, right? Like
exactly, yes, they're using one metaphor to describe another metaphor that is supposed to be some conversation about reality somewhere in there, and they have a double metaphor, but they don't have a reality. Yeah, it's horrible. It's horrible. And then you see these, I mean, there's videos on YouTube, you know, all these high school teachers and stuff, and they're using this, look, you can buy a big giant sheet of spandex and you can put it around this ring and you can create a gravity well. And it's like, you know, this is so
lame
because it's like, well, why don't you explain how this really isn't anything like gravity? Because to have gravity, you have to create a frictionless surface, and then every time you throw a marble on the damn thing, it's going to shoot out the other end. You fucking retards! You can't possibly, you can't let a marble go on the edge without it falling over the other edge, jackass. I mean, fuck.
Yeah, just describing it in terms of curvature too, because then, you know, you're supposed to accept, like, if you jump up in the air, then you're sliding down this curve.
Yeah, well, and it's such a dishonest curve because it really doesn't illustrate exactly how gravity works. Is, you know, because the R squared thing is this, you know, it's this kind of a curve. You know, I mean, like I said, every time you throw something, it's either going to fly out the other side or it's going to fall in the middle. It's never going to do this swirly crap. I mean, not never. I won't say never, but it's not going to do the swirly crap unless you throw a whole handful of things and they can bang into each other.
Yeah. And you can tell that you're not falling down a curve when you're falling, you know? Like, you can tell that gravity's a force.
You're falling in a pretty straight fucking line. Yeah, I can see exactly what I'm going to land on, you know.
Or if you lift something heavy.
I don't jump off the Empire State Building and land in Chicago.
Right. Or even just lifting something heavy. Gravity feels like a force. It doesn't feel like a slip and slide.
Yeah, you know, it just always was a really bad. I'm just saying I never could, you know, it was like Catholicism or something. I mean, I just never could take it seriously. I could just, you know, all I could say was, well, okay, that's what they believe, but I don't think that's the right answer. You know, everybody wants to jump on that, fine, but there's got to be some other explanation for what's pulling things together than the empty space decided to push it.
Yeah. Well, you know, I'm not insinuating that it was a conspiracy, but it is kind of an ultimate prank in a way to get, you know, serious. You know, imagine if it turns out that it's just as you like. If people come to accept it, I mean, it's obviously so silly. But just in retrospect, you know, when you think about people like Stephen Hawking and all these big guys, it's like they were taken so seriously and thought of as the smartest men in the world, and they're just studying nothing. It's just one big joke. They're clowns.
Well, and you can kind of see their lack of imagination. I mean, the whole idea of him thinking aliens are going to come here and eat us was just like, what? You mean they're going to come for what, a drink of water? I'm going to fly across the cosmos to steal a glass of water? You know, yeah, sure they are. I'm sure they have nothing better to do with their time than fly in a spaceship for 1 billion years to go kill some humans and eat them.
Right. Well,
I need a hamburger. Well, let's not go to McDonald's. Let's go to Earth. You know, it's only 1 billion light years away.
Right.
No problem.
Well, the whole theory is kind of tied in with the sense that, you know, we're going to go out into the cosmos and meet, you know, go to other galaxies and bullshit that we're not going to do, right? Where it's like you would just point out that, no, you have to acquire all the velocity.
Yeah, well, that's another one.
How are you going to get it? How are you going to get the velocity?
There are so many things I would have never thought of if I didn't think of this theory. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that whole velocity thing is so interesting because I never thought about how you actually gain, like how heavy things could possibly gain velocity, because there's stuff hitting them from all directions. And to gain velocity, you have to have a lot of stuff hit you from one direction.
Yeah.
And how do you gain that velocity? Because the supernovas aren't going to do it. I mean, they're not going to give a sun, you know, 3/4 of the light speed kind of velocity or something. You know, you need a tremendous amount of energy to move a big fat thing like the sun.
Right. And then to keep it going where you want it to go as it encounters, denser areas of other stars and things like that. It just
the whole banging into argument is like that. That's like the gravity wave thing. Like, how did this gravity wave, this huge giant tsunami, they're heading for Earth, and it doesn't do any damage on its way. It didn't annihilate anything, So anything, there was all kinds of stars that were really close to the wave, and somehow they survived.
Yeah, well, that's one of the ones that makes me paranoid, where I feel like they spent over $1 billion on that thing, and I'm like, it's too big to fail, kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like, what are they going to do? Not find gravitational waves after they spent 20 years and $1 billion?
Well, I just think that if they were doing it if they were conspiring, they could come up with a better lie, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the whole black hole swirling around each other thing is just so silly. And then the whole idea that they collided with each other without blowing up is silly. And then the whole idea, that they have so many momentum issues. Where did all the speed go?
Yeah.
I mean, whatever this thing that's left over, it's got to be spinning at about 1 zillion miles an hour, right?
Yeah.
Well, there's nothing else it could be doing, right? It's either flying somewhere or it's spinning real fast, but it's got to be doing something bizarre, because where did all that energy go, you fucking nuts?
Well, even just the fact that...
And then the ultimate one was the fact that they converted the fucking mass into fucking bent space. And I'm like, can't anybody call them on that? Where did they get that? Nobody, and I never heard it anywhere. Where have you ever heard somebody say it's possible to turn matter into bent space?
I don't know. That's brand new. And
yeah,
they have to explain that shit.
So if they're going to come up with a 3 bear story, I'm just saying they really don't have to do the silverware thing, do they? Do the 3 bears have to have a bathroom? Couldn't they say they went to the bathroom when they went outside? I mean, can't they make it a little bit realistic?
Right. So, that's that kind of thing that really makes me ask, like, what the fuck happened? Because it kind of has the feeling that there was some kind of a board meeting. There was just a compromise between a bunch of different people.
Yeah, I just think it was a bunch of eggheads playing sci-fi theater. You know what I mean? They're all a bunch of eggheads, right? So they're all nerdy and quirky and weird, right? Yeah. They all got like boogers in their nose, and their glasses are on crooked, and they've got ink stains in their pocket. And they're all going, oh, well, what about this? They're doing all that retarded, spastic, fucking I'm a smart guy thing. And I think that's all it was. It was a room full of spastic retards, and they just kept throwing different balls of glitter together and saying, well, let's put a piece of glitter over here, and then they'll stick this one on here. That looks like it. Look, that looks just like it. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Exactly what I was thinking.
It's like a Puro chat room.
Yeah, you could just see this nerd written all over it. It's a tower of nerd that built this theory.
Yeah, or this kind of like cult of personal acceptance. They're like, well, everybody's input is going to be heard, and we're going to include everyone's input, and it just turns into like, what the fuck? They're inventing a new physics. Now matter can turn into fucking gravity waves.
Yeah, that makes it even funner. Yeah, that makes it even funner when you invented new physics.
Well, there's something wrong. There's something wrong with that. In that particular one, like that's this one that I've really lost all faith that these people are even.
Yeah, well, look, I don't want to bring the subject up, but I mean, it is a little bit smelly that it's 3 bitches in charge. You know what I mean? I mean, the hierarchy, the 5 big names, 3 of them are women. And you're just saying, yeah, this sounds like some kind of crap women would come up with. I mean, the Science Foundation was led by a woman. They're the one who financed the whole thing.
Right.
The project scientist, she's a woman. And the 2 theoretical guys are guys, but the whole organization is woman focused. So you're just saying, yeah, this sounds about as gay as you can fucking get. I mean, they're either women or gay, right? This is something only gay guys could come up with. Sorry, I mean, everybody's going to get pissed off, but I just mean it just has the smell of overdone, flowers, and you know what I'm saying? You know what I mean? Gay aesthetics, I mean, just completely flamboyant, tigers on the black canvas, just out, Liberace, right? It's Liberace all over the place.
Yeah, I pictured kind of maybe something like more like a Puro chat room or something, just like a bunch of people talking over each other.
Yeah, well, whatever. Yeah, I don't see it that way. I see it as being much more cooperatively flamboyant.
Yeah, I don't know. Fuck. But we know it's fucked. Whatever's going on over there.
Well, it has nothing to do with any. There was no mechanic in the room. You know what I mean? There was nobody who actually has taken apart anything or actually changed a tire
Yeah.
or anything in the real physical universe. These are all people who have lived in a synthetic, fake, techno poppy poop universe, and they never did anything realistic where they actually picked up a magnet and said, "Oh, that's interesting."
Yeah.
No, it's all a bunch of mathematical jibber jabber, and they're just like, well, what if we put a sine theta in there, and then one of those LE things with the W on it, and then we just cube the whole damn thing. Won't that do it?
Yeah, it's the Matrix. It's the computer simulation based physics or whatever.
Well, I mean, but yeah, I don't mind computer based. This isn't computer based. This is just like I said. I think it's flamboyance based.
Well, I mean, like flashy graphics based.
No, yeah. Well, I'm just saying, no substance, all style.
Yeah.
Right. It's all Gucci and DeLorean, and it's all bullshit.
Yeah, and the Sligo one though, they don't even care anymore. Like seriously, that matter converting to gravity, like that's not to be found in any literature of any physics.
I'm saying, yeah, right there. I'm just saying the conspiracy is quite obvious, but you're just saying not one fucking physicist could point out how that doesn't sound quite right. Like who the fuck put that in the rules? I mean, that's a new rule now that you can destroy matter. I thought the whole energy cannot be created or destroyed thing was a rule. I didn't know you can convert it into fucking the other dimension, the space dimension. I didn't know you could convert matter into a dimension.
Yeah, how can it be that not one reputable like Nobel Prize winner, or not even Nobel Prize winner, but just one head of a physics department of a major university or something like that has not just wanted to distance themselves from that, has not just felt like the need to just be
not one. There's not even a video. Like I said, I'm the only person that's brought it up as far as I know.
Yeah.
Who else has brought it up? Have you seen one video by a physicist or anybody who even went to a physics lecture or anyone who went to MIT? Nobody is saying anything. And it's like, how could there be this much silence? I mean, this is pretty fucking goddamn. I mean, as soon as I heard it, I mean, it was floored me. I was like,
yeah, me too.
Converted 3 solar masses into a depression in space-time.
Yeah.
What do you mean? You can't do that. Who the fuck said you can do that?
Well, it's funny because I'd sort of paid attention to the previous drama with the Bicep 2 thing, right? Where they claimed that they found the gravitational waves in the background radiation.
The background radiation, yeah, and then
they had to retract it, right? So I kind of like followed that one through, and when I first heard that one, I was like, "Fuck!" Like I had all these problems with it, but then they ended up retracting it, and so I was kind of on this one. I kind of was like, from the beginning of it as well. I was just like, I've been looking at these things, just seeing them come up, and it's like it was very convenient.
Well, I said coincidentally or not coincidentally, obviously she's a woman of some stature, but I mean I'd actually seen the woman who's the head of this thing, right, doing a couple of different TV shows, right, documentaries. So I had heard her talking about it, and you could just see on her face, you could see, like this was like a year before, and you could see her just feeding the idea that this is going to happen. And it's like, you're just like, somehow she knows that they're going to find this. And I'm like, how does she know they're going to find this? I mean, why is she so confident? Because she's going to look like shit if she doesn't, right? So I'm just saying, how is she sitting in her chair and she doesn't look nervous at all? I'd be damn nervous if I'm sitting there, with this whole big pile of money piled on this stupid theoretical crap. And I got nothing. I got nothing in my bag. Absolutely nothing in my bag but theoretical crap. And
depending on black holes existing.
Right. And I'm going to sit there and have a conversation about how I'm going to find this shit. I mean,
you're betting $1 billion that black holes exist.
I mean, the very idea that they can filter, that somehow they have like I said, maybe I brought these points up so you know them. But how can they filter for every noise in the universe when they can't possibly have heard every noise in the universe?
Yeah.
There could be a noise bouncing through the universe right now from a geyser that blew up on planet X, that caused the galaxy to explode, right? And when that galaxy exploded, it created a wave that's bouncing through the universe right now. How the fuck can they know that happened 400 million years ago, and that wave every 1.3 billion years passes through Earth? How could they know that?
Yeah, they can't know that.
There's no filter for that. There's absolutely no filter for that. So how the fuck can they sit there and say we filtered out every noise in the universe? Right. No, I don't think you fucking have.
Well, I was actually arguing that exact point with Piro, and then he's like, well, that they know of. And I'm like, that they know of. Well, they don't know very much. They don't even have a solid theory.
How long have we been listening to the universe and recording what it's doing? I don't think we're even doing that now, frankly. So we're not even taking good notes now, let alone good notes for 100 million years. I don't think you have notes for 100 million years.
Right, and then you just get this thing where it's like, you could have a much more local event of much lower intensity that would seem like something huge, right? It's like a moonquake or something like that.
Well, I'm just saying we don't know what noises are taking place in our own galaxy.
Yeah.
Constantly just from the grinding of these objects, right? I mean, the torque that they're applying to each other, in some cases, that torque is incredible, right? When two galaxies collide in the universe, there's a bunch of torque in the sense that all of the gravitational bodies are being twisted and heated and, bent and twisted. You know what I'm saying? So there's all kinds of torque happening, and torque creates fissures and fractures and all of those. If something like if you could even create a black hole, let's say, and it was a 3,000 solar mass black hole, all you need to do is put a crack in the damn thing, and that's going to create one hell of a gravity fluctuation.
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking more about gravity as well. Like after listening to the video yesterday, I looked up, do you know that the sun is actually 99.9% of the mass of the solar system? I was kind of surprised to read that, but
when I found out it was 1.4 billion meters across, I said, oh yeah, that is pretty big.
Yeah, it's 99.9% of the mass, and
see, right? It's 99.9% of the mass, and yet its gravity on its surface is only 70 meters per second per second. It's only 7 times more gravitationally heavy than the Earth. So that's sort of an irony, right? Because those two numbers don't really match, right? 99 to 1, and then you have 7 to 77. 7 to 77.
I think the way that they model it, it's like they imagine that there's a solid core that's made out of metals, and that basically all the plasmatic illumination is sort of like, you could almost think of it as like a giant atmosphere.
Yeah, I don't think that's possible, just because the radiation goes both ways. So, I think there's layers of the sun that are producing a radiation that wouldn't allow any metal to stay stable. It would have to go radioactive.
Right. Well, this is the theory that the mainstream theory, anyways. But the thing there's those sunspots, right? And it kind of looks like there's actually it's dark inside.
Yeah, I know, but that's just because of the congestion issue. The stuff is percolating, and the speeds get different, and so it's like a traffic jam. So it can't get to the surface, so it blisters.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like the radiation isn't all moving the same speed. I mean, some of the radiation is actual radiation, and then there's heavier ions on top of it. And the ions can't move as fast as the radiation, so the radiation builds up below the ions, and it can't push, and so it creates a pimple, and then you get a sunspot and all that kind of crap. But
I don't really have.
I'm just saying it's just a mixture of still semi-material objects and radiation. That's what the sun is. You know what I mean? It's hydrogen nucleuses still. It's helium. There's all kinds of shit in layers, and so you can just sort of understand that the layers are different viscosities, and they're constantly jiggling, and that's why the sun's jiggling.
Right. And you know, we're not very familiar with this plasma state of matter either. So yeah, I need to think about that one a bit more actually.
Oh, I mean, to me, it's as obvious as like a boiling pot of water. I mean, that's all the sun is doing. It's a boiling ball of crap, and it's just boiling. You know, I mean, I know that's a simple analogy, but I just mean that obviously there's some surface tensions, there's different things. That's why it explodes. It's just jets shooting out of pressure. Pressure builds up in the interior. It shoots out like a volcano. You know, blah blah blah. It's just not.
I think there's just sort of like different electrical properties in the plasma phase. At least that's what's said. I don't know. I need to look into that more. I don't want to say too much about that, but I think they claim that the atoms are like freely exchanging electrons or something like that. Like they're basically like.
Well, they always. I'm just saying I think they make it more complicated than it is. I'm just saying it's obviously hot and liquid. So I guess to me that sort of just says all I need to know.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole idea of plasma is just a word. You know what I mean? It's just a word for what? You know, really liquidy liquid. You know, super liquidy liquid.
Or really gaseous gas, I guess, maybe.
Yeah, well, I just mean that it doesn't really say anything to me, you know, it's just kind of a word. So
yeah, I think it's meant to represent some kind of like electrical properties of the atoms or something. I don't know, whatever.
Well, I'm just saying I don't think I don't think it matters much. It's just the fact that when you know this is just I don't think there's anything phenomenologically, you know, fantastic going on. You know what I mean? It's just obviously it's a radioactive process of destroying atoms and reconfiguring them, and that creates a lot of photons.
Right.
That's kind of obvious, right? Isn't that what the whole fucking thing is doing? Is creating a ton of photons.
Yep, definitely. It's obviously doing that, right? Super.
Yeah. So it just seems kind of obvious that yes, okay, so that's what suns do. They make photons because they keep breaking the little atoms into pieces and then putting them back together again. You know, differently. You know, they keep crashing Rolls Royces into Volkswagens and making, you know, roll wagons. And have a bunch of parts left over that they throw into the universe.
I was thinking of something. I'm trying to think of my thought again here. I lost track of it.
Yeah, well, there's so much. Like I said, I'm just surprised that every day I think of some new angle. You know, something never would have occurred to me if I didn't go back all the way to the beginning and start over. It's that whole go back to the beginning, start over. And it just, you know, because I'm thinking about the whole angle of reflection thing and material surfaces. And I really think I have an angle on that now, you know, in terms of, you know, when a photon goes into a substance, it hits the electron and the electron starts to move in the direction that the photon was going.
Yeah.
It depends on how far it can move, depends on whether it ejects the photon straight back or at an angle. Right? Yeah. So if there's pressure from other electrons, the electron can't move up and down. So when a light comes straight down at something, the electron can go straight down. There's room below it to move down.
Yeah.
Right. There's less pressure, so it can do that. But the electron can't go sideways because all the electrons are really close together sideways. That's where the real pressure in the matter is, you know, on the surface.
Yeah.
It's sideways pressure. So the electron can't go sideways. And so what it ends up doing is bouncing off the other electron, right? So it's not that the light bounces off anything. The electron bounces off the other electron and then emits the photon at the angle. So I think I've got the angular thing, you know, the geometry where it goes in this way, the electron bounces off the other electron, and now it emits the photon at exactly the right angle.
Yeah.
So
I kind of picture it as almost like squeezing it out more because it's some kind of pressure thing, right? Like
I got the geometry to explain why the angle of incidence is the same as the angle of reflection. That's why it's the same, is because the reflection is happening inside the material when the electron bounces off of it and then emits the photon.
That makes a lot of intuitive sense to me. Like when I first heard that, that just seems like, yeah, that's right. Like there's a clockwork. It's like a gearing mechanism.
And the angle of the fact that at a certain angle water reflects all the light is because all the electrons are all spaced, and once you're angle is at a certain point, you can't possibly hit anything but the surface. You know what I mean? The electron, you're hitting it at such a acute angle that the electron can't possibly do anything else but hit, spin, and throw it back out. You know, it can't possibly go down anymore. It can only go sideways. So you're basically just causing the electron to jiggle this way, back and forth, and so it can't possibly do any depth.
Yeah.
And, but the obvious point is it can't get through the holes. You know, it's like a grating, and at a certain angle, the grating disappears. Right, those holes disappear as soon as I hit that angle. There's no holes anymore. I can't help but hit an electron. If I hit an electron, I'm reflecting. If I don't hit an electron, I'll go into the material. So that's how it works, right? It's just the holes. The holes become invisible as the angle is increased.
Yeah, I think you got it. That sounds very reasonable.
Yeah, I'm just saying that every day that happens. Well, not every day, but you know what I'm saying? Like within a 3-day period, there'll be some new thing like that occurs to me. And I say, oh, fuck, there it is. Oh, fuck, there it is. Oh, fuck, there it is.
Yeah, I find like things seem comprehensible on a physical level generally more. Like you can kind of scale in and out of things. Like you can imagine, like you don't have to apply all these different mechanical things to everything. It all just, you know, the scales flow from each other.
Yeah, and it creates this conservation. I always heard the word conservation, but you could never make conservation out of their physics, right? Because you have the space-time dimension that isn't connected in any way to the material dimension, and then gravity is not in any way connected to anything happening in the atom. So there's no way to make conservation. And now I have complete everything I look at, every equation. I can see the conservation because I can see that, you know, either the electron moves or the electron has to expel, but it can't do both and it can't do neither.
Right.
You know what I'm saying is if a photon goes in, it's like a fish moving. It has to be accounted for till some other fish goes out. So until some other fish goes out, that fucking school has to move.
Right. And that kind of ties in with the sort of frequency of light, giving it, you know, creating different patterns that you would get, say, in like a slit or whatever.
Yeah, well, you know, the frequency thing is, I mean, it's not really relevant except for the idea that it makes it detectable by the electron. The electron can absorb those fish. It can't absorb the fish that aren't in a frequency, it can't possibly gain mass from. So electrons can gain mass from photons at a frequency. That's when they get to a higher energy, right? Yeah. They're just gaining mass, but they can't gain mass from gravity. Right. Gravity will move them, but they can't gain mass from it.
Yeah. Yeah, I was even thinking about like trying to understand like the physiology of the anatomy of the eye, like how we detect light, that it would have to, you know, it's a bunch of tickers, like a bunch of counters. If, you know, just because of the frequent, like the way that
well, I'm just saying it's the electrons, you know, it's always the electrons, but yeah, you're just creating an eye, you know, something that is primed to be a cascade. So it's a bunch of electrons made into a situation where they're like magnets at a very fragile condition. Like one tiny movement of any of the magnets and all the magnets collide into each other.
Yeah.
And that's basically all it is. It's just it's a magnetic field primed, and as soon as you move one of the electrons, the whole field breaks down. So a tiny photon hits it, the field breaks down, you got an electric signal.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, so I have to say, as much as this is irritating as fuck, it's really disappointing that my father might go fucking delusionally crazy before he knows I win, you know, which really pisses me off. But I mean, I have to say, this is the most fun I've ever had as a brain, just playing with this. I mean, it's just been amazing to go through this process of just, you know, I was really elated to just do the gravity thing. And the fact that it answers all these other questions is just such a free lunch. You know, I mean, I'm just sitting here saying this is just so interesting.
Yeah, it's exciting for sure.
You know, it's work. I'm not saying I'm not frustrated by it, because it is hard work to think of all this crap and try to get all this information and be able to analyze it correctly. But I have to say, my brain is really enjoying solve. You know, it's like Einstein analogized it to a crossword puzzle, right?
Yeah.
And the the right words, and I can feel the puzzleness that I'm working on and how all these words are falling into place now. And it's just like so much fun to just watch it all fall into place.
Yeah, it's fun for me to watch it fall into place too. Like I agree. It's because it's just everything lining up, right? It's just, it's like a domino rally or some kind of major eclipse of all the elements.
Yeah, it's just, it's like
it's all been disordered. It's all been so bad.
Yeah, it's a little kid with the connected dots thing or something, and you're just like, oh no, wait a minute, if I do this, it's a dinosaur, but I mean, it's much bigger than that, but you know what I mean? It's just that idea that, yeah, it's just so obvious now. And that's the hard part of arguing it, right? Because now I'm sitting here where it's so obvious, and you're just saying, how does anybody fall for that bent space shit? That's such a silly, lame explanation.
Yeah, it's hard to have any sympathy. You're just no, come on, wake up.
It's just such a God theory. It's like getting evolution, and you say, oh, yeah, well, God is really lame by comparison. Yeah, because this makes a lot more sense. Now I know why my anus smells.
Right.
I mean, now I know why rotten flesh smells and why this does this and why all this shit does it. Why I have nipples. Now I know.
Yeah. It'd be really cool to see like a really good like animation of the concepts at some point. Like something that really nails it and describes it in visual terms, and that you could sort of make like a film that would carry you through, explain the concepts, and then sort of, because I think if people had it represented. And then there was even some comparisons to the other shitty explanations. Like if they were really well illustrated, you could just win.
I'm really in the mood to try to do something, because I actually had the idea of doing that, like one of those fish, the Disney movies, and just have a fish and a fish narrate it. I just love the idea of a fish narrating it. That's just so perfect. Like, oh yeah, if I could have a fish narrate the story of the material universe, and just say, you people have confused the school with the fish. They're different things.
Have you seen that YouTuber? He's named like Eugene Kuratanovsky or something like that. He does really, really good 3D animations explaining physics concepts, and a lot of the ones like explaining like certain mathematical stuff and also electricity and stuff. They're really, really good. Like when I saw them, I was like, wow, I wish they had this when I was in high school. It would have helped. But like I imagine, like I'll put some links or something on this video, but you should check it out, because it sort of just shows the power of like illustrating some of these things alongside the explanation.
Well, I hear what you're saying, but obviously watching some of those things pisses me off, because they're wrong, and you're like, oh man, it's so full of shit.
Well, some of them are okay. Some of them, yes, a lot of them are wrong, but the ones that explain, like, there's certain concepts that aren't things that I don't think you'd have a problem with the way that he explains certain things, because it's they're more like Newtonian concepts, or just stuff that's kind of solid mechanics.
You just said electricity. My brain just goes to the argument that electrons are moving faster when there's no current in the wire. These stupid points they make, and then you're saying, no, they're not moving, jackass. They're jiggling. Jiggling is different than moving.
Right. Okay, yeah. Well, sometimes he kind of takes his own path with describing it in these things and just does something that works, and it's not always the whatever.
Well,
I think
I'm just going by my reaction, just because I've seen good animations, really well-produced videos that are saying absolute shit. Like applying relativity to the function of electricity, and you're just like, oh man, what are you doing? What are you talking about? The time dilation of the photon as it goes around the electron, and you're like, you're gonna take that time dilation shit and fucking shove it into the interaction between a photon and an electron? I mean, it's bad enough you're doing out in the big universe, but to apply that crap here?
Yeah.
I mean,
this one guy, I think he's kind of exceptional, because it's the only animations of that kind that I've really, really liked. And I think the guy kind of stands out from the normal stuff that even looks good or whatever, just in terms of it's just clarity. So whether or not you even like the way he describes it, it's just like there's something about the thoroughness of the description, because it has a narrating voice as well, explaining the concepts. And it's just like, I just imagine just putting the eventually, if you could sort of put your theory in that kind of format, I think it would just really help people to leap over some of the obstacles of thinking, you know, of
yeah, well, part of me just doesn't want to do the propaganda thing, because it all ends up being like, yeah, it's all this style argument again. You know, I made it stylish and therefore it's consumable, and I really don't want to have to do that. But I understand what you're saying. I'm not saying it's not something I got to realistically do, but I just mean,
yeah,
I'm just explaining why I just can't get all that enthusiastic about super cool animation bullshit if I'm not saying this. You know what I'm saying? If everybody who's using it is talking shit, then I'm just another guy with gold lettering on my book. Yeah, use gold lettering, that works.
Yeah, fair enough. You know, I think I visualize it a lot. Like, that's how I understand it, is from visualizing it. And I think it seems like people who don't get physics, like, they need some help there.
No, but I'm just saying that I think I've partially already accomplished some of that by coming up with these analogies to, like, dancing. You know, the dance analogy. I mean, these are good analogies. So
yeah, they work for me. They work for me. I'm just trying to think of, like, ways that you could, you know, succeed with a broader audience or something. I mean, it's going to happen eventually, right?
Yeah, well, I'm not really concerned about a broad audience. I'm concerned about the physicists, because they're the ones that really have to do the trial. So I'm just saying, if physicists need me to do an animation, well, that's kind of bogus.
All right, fair enough.
You know, so I mean, if I can't make a clinical argument to physicists, then I don't really care about convincing the public. Because they're not going to, even if I made a really flashy piece of animation, if the rest of physics, you know, the Einsteins of physics say it's not right, well, I'm still fucked.
Well, I think that, like, given like what we're seeing with LIGO and shit like that, I mean, it's hard to imagine that these people are gonna acquiesce to anything else in their careers. Like, I don't know.
Well, but if I'm handing somebody the ride where they can be part of the new revolution, you know what I'm saying? It's one thing for them because they don't have a counter theory. You know what I mean? If I give them the counter theory to explain why the bullshit is bullshit, because they have the counter theory that works. You know what I mean? I mean, it's one thing to dispute God when you don't have evolution. When you have evolution, then you're going to have the courage to say there's no God, right? So I'm just saying, if I can hand somebody the evolution, I think I can get a physicist to jump on board, because he wants to be the guy who made it happen. You know what I mean? He wants to be relevant.
Right.
And he'll see the fact that this is the game. This is the fucking holy grail. And he'll say, yeah, I want to put my name on it too.
Or maybe they'll try to steal it.
Well, I'm just saying, same difference, but I just mean, the point is my appeal is going to be the fact that I'm offering a viable alternative.
Right, but like I'm saying, I'm sort of pointing out that there's this lack of there's that sort of competitive aspect of it seems to be lacking, and I don't know.
I think they're plenty competitive, so you can say they're not competitive. I think they're all trying to come up with some kind of absolute crap to make themselves outstanding. So to say they're not competitive, I think they're competing very hard to come up with some sort of bullshit. So
right, yeah. Well, okay. I think the competition is happening on a different. I don't know. I'm just saying, like, whatever's wrong with physics, like, understanding.
I know, the only thing wrong with physics is the presumptions. I'm just saying they have the same problem as what's wrong with religion, is that it's based on ignorant presumptions that they can't let go of.
Yeah, I know, but like, look at we were just talking about that LIGO thing. It's like they're inventing these new.
Well, I guess they're not doing it as you think by some kind of calculation. I'm saying they're doing it based on their own.
I'm not trying to say that.
I'm saying they're doing it based on just pure enthusiasm. So they're not doing any of the foundational work. They're just living on the presumptions. So they've already accepted SpongeBob as reality. And so now they're just saying, okay, SpongeBob is reality. So we're in the water, we can make bubbles, and we can do this, and we can do. So they're coming up.
Listen, I'm not trying to suggest that it's like a conscious conspiracy thing. I'm really not. I'm just saying that I think that the sort of thing has maybe tuned itself into the fact that they can make more money by.
I just don't think it's that complicated. I think they're just living on the fact that people are gobbling up every time they say the word quantum and eraser and you know, anytime they say these magic words, everybody gets all gooey around them.
Right. Yeah. So it's just a question of, will they give that up?
Well, I think I can get them to give it up in a second if they get to put their name on the Holy Grail.
Right.
All right. So if I can get their name on the trophy, they're gonna say, "Fuck! Oh, you're right. This was all a big pile of shit. Let's get back to reality." Fuck SpongeBob. It's a goddamn cartoon.
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting to see how that turns out.
Yeah. Well, I got to do some emailing. I hate that I have to. I have to do everything, right? I mean, I have to make all the videos. I have to do all this determinism. I have to argue all this shit because everybody's a fucking idiot. Nobody can argue anything. So it's really irritating. I have to do all the work. Ugh.
Well, that's another thing, I noticed like that they don't debate very, like there's hardly any debates. Like you can't watch a debate with physicists.
Well, they do debate a little bit. So, they have a conference on some subject and there'll be 10 of them sitting in chairs and they'll talk about their opposing theories. And every now and then they'll get a little snarky. But
barely a debate.
It's a pretty lame debate. But the point is the debate always has the same premise. So who cares? It's like, it's like Mr. Natural brought up in that stupid conversation with Piro. He talked about, well, there's lots of different interpretations of physics. And you're saying, yeah, and they're all wrong. It doesn't fucking... So there's 7 different interpretations of the 2 slit experiment. Yeah, and every single one of them is premised on the fact that the photon splits in half. They're all dependent on who can make up the wackiest explanation. Okay, multiverses happen and blah, 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 blah. I mean, they're all premised on a stupid... They're all premised on the fact that they haven't acknowledged that there's single slit interference, for fuck's sake.
Or they're debating whether black holes can evaporate or not or something
Well, I'm just saying that I think there's competition, but there's competition built on top of SpongeBob.
Yeah, right. Okay. I agree with you. That's what I was ultimately trying to get at as well. It's just that how to enter the field of battle, how to present your case in a way that they feel that they, that they have to take it on.
That I can present the case. I just need to get their ear. So I just have to have an ear. If I have an ear for 2 hours of a real physicist, I really don't think he could be a Piro. I don't think he could sit there and make up crap like that.
Well, some of those guys on TV are almost as bad as that.
Well, they could be. I'm not saying it's not true. I'm just saying if there's any kind of genuine passion, you know what I mean? If it was a Richard Dawkins and I really had a theory of whatever mechanics that, completely denied that the DNA molecule was in control and that really a virus was in control, I think Richard Dawkins, even though he's an egomaniac and all that shit, I think he cares enough about science to say, oh shit, that is the truth.
Right. Or he's had, he's in biology, so he hasn't had the opportunity to leave the building.
Well, I think he has something called integrity. So I'm just saying, if I find somebody with integrity, there's no way they can deny that I have a pretty persuasive argument here to convict this as at least a mistrial. That at least, at minimum, we should start over. Yeah. And clearly, I have an alternative theory that seems to have almost everything you could want from a theory.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's pretty obvious that their shit's fucked. Dark matter, dark energy, all that shit. It's just they're cooked. They're done. Some of them must know it.
Well, they are.
I don't understand how they could not figure this shit out. I'm not a physicist.
Yeah, like I said, there are some that are really uncomfortable, with the dark matter thing. So there are a few out there saying, this is just a contrivance. And there's even, like I said, there was one guy who wrote a book on the Huygens thing, and well, he didn't write a whole book on it, but I mean, he was an instructor in physics, and he actually pointed out that Huygens is completely irrational. I mean, photons creating photons to see where they're going. None of this makes any sense. So how can a photon, it's only moving charges, create force? How can it possibly create a force?
Yeah, maybe the whole thing will take shape in like a different country or something like that. Maybe it'll take place in China or something, outside of the whole 10-year bullshit.
Yeah. Well, that's a whole other subject, right? Because unfortunately, the Japanese and the Chinese are just like the nature of a human being is to imitate, and they just want to Elvis everything. They're almost worse.
Right. But maybe like in 20 years come into their own a bit.
Gobble this shit up. I mean, I bet you there's more. I bet you there's quantum, written in Japanese all over the fucking place over there in Japan. I mean, I bet they're all quantum whores.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if they are or not. I mean, I think that
I'm just going based on what papers they write. Okay, so I'm just saying that the papers that come out of China and Japan are all full of woo woo, and they're the people that are doing experiments where they're making invisible cats and shit. You know what I mean? They're just so fucking, they really don't know what science is. Science is something else to make money on. That's all they're doing.
Yeah, I would have thought that, some people there might sort of have more of a lingering respect for like engineering and a kind of engineerable physics or something. I don't know. Some kind of very pragmatic society or something.
I know, but we know they're not very pragmatic, because pragmatism means to them just volume to production equations, and they really don't care how many people got squished in the process. So I'm just saying that I just saying that they're very SpongeBob-y, in my opinion.
Right. So maybe it'll be somewhere
else. They're perfectly comfortable with the idea that let's just simplify everything and turn everything into a cartoon.
Well, if I had to predict it, I would predict that your thing is going to take off not in the United States. It'd be somewhere Europe or the UK or something. I mean,
I think there's going to be somebody. If somebody's going to grab it, the Americans aren't going to want it to be somebody else. So I mean, somebody is going to. Yeah, I think I can get an American to say, yeah, we want this to be an American idea.
Well, it'll be interesting to see.
But I mean, the guy I'm going to contact, one guy I know I got to contact, he is a Brit, so so what am I going to, nothing you can do about that.
Yeah, I think Britain. I don't know. I feel Britain would be more likely, but I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, I'm just saying, he's a Spaniard teaching in Britain, so yeah. So
right. But just the atmosphere of Britain academia, I think, is a little tiny hair better than the United States. The United States, I don't know. It's really. Like, I just know some younger people who are, doing doctoral work and stuff like that. And just the atmosphere in universities these days is really pathetic. It's kind of been taken over by politics and things like that.
But the British are really bad. They got that Indian guy, who's British, whatever, Al-Qaeda or whatever his name is, and he makes these documentaries and they're just so bad. And then Hawkins is so bad. I mean, so they got a lot of bad shit over there.
Yeah. Well, I just said a hair.
Well, I'm just saying, if I go by the talking heads of physics in Britain, they seem pretty loopy to me.
Yeah, that's true. I guess all the talking heads are loopy, but I don't know. Whatever. I'm not sure. I'm just, it's just speculation, really.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, you're Canadian, so you're always trying to. You have your American inferiority complex. So.
Well, I don't even see it as. I don't think we're that distinct from the United States, really.
Oh, whatever. You're fucking America's welfare whore. That's all you. I mean, that's all you are. We knocked you up years ago, and you're just living on the dole.
What do you mean?
Well, I just mean that your Canada wouldn't survive as a country if it wasn't for the United States feeding it and giving it technology and giving it protection in the world. I mean, you would have been a Russian province by now.
Right. Well, it's a natural resource based economy, really. Like, I think.
Well, I'm just saying you haven't foot the bill, right? We have to fork over $500 billion a year for the military-industrial complex. You don't got to pay any of those bills.
Yeah, put it into medical.
Well, I'm just saying there's a huge difference. You're
Yeah. It's not so bad, really.
Well, I'm just saying you always have our backstop. You got us to sell your oil for you. You got us to do a lot of. We're buy your lumber. Blah blah blah. I mean, I know Japan buys a lot of it, but I just mean we're just easy.
Yeah.
Easy to build an economy.
Free trade agreement.
It's very easy to build an economy when you live next door to the richest people on earth, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's very convenient.
Especially when we've got 1/10 of their population.
Yeah,
right?
well, I'm just saying, it just makes it kind of convenient because even the rich people garbage is worth eating. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's pretty nice to live here, though. We don't have a lot of the problems that the United States has. We don't have...
I'm not saying, I'm just saying the only reason why I wouldn't live in Canada is because it's too fucking north. So if you could move Canada, you know, below Florida, yeah, I'm moving.
You live in New Jersey, right? I don't think it's that much different than where I live.
Oh, please, come on. You know, we got winter, but we don't got fucking 10 months of it.
No, Toronto is not, it's, I don't know. It's not, it's actually pretty warm in the winter.
Well, I mean, you have the whole lake effect crap or whatever you got, but I'm just saying it's still not.
Yeah, most of it sucks.
I'm just saying I wouldn't. I'm just not a cold. I hate cold weather. I hate 60s. I hate 50s. I hate 40. I hate anything below 80. I'm already.
Yeah, I hate it too. Actually, I would prefer to live in a warmer climate. I think. A lot of ways.
I mean, I wouldn't live in New Jersey. It's just an accident that I live here. But you know what I mean. So if I had my preference, I'd definitely be in a warmer climate. It's I got no use for snow at all. It's the most obnoxious, hideous, disgusting shit invented. It's just horrid.
Now, how did people do it before electricity? I sometimes wonder in the winter. I'm like, how did people do this back when it was, they didn't have modern luxuries? Jesus.
Fire. No, they had fire. Fires.
Well, yeah, I know they had fire, but I'm saying it's just so miserable. There's nothing to do.
Well, I know, but fire does make it all okay. I mean, if I did that for a while where I just, every night I had a fire and I sat there for hours, and even the neighbors, I was an alcoholic, but we could, you can do that fire thing, and it's very takes you back to the, what I mean? It really makes you philosophical.
We're like the first kind of humans that didn't do that. Really, we're just coming, we're just fresh out of that.
It kind of is good for your brain because you see the bugs fly into the fire and you just see the whole mortality of life, and you just see it has this chemistry thing happen right before you. There's physics all around. You know what I mean? And then it has the whole air where you can have deep philosophical conversation, and it's just such a great atmosphere for, it's like a drug. You know what I mean?
Just watching how the log burns. It's like the original TV.
So to me, I'm just saying fire is it does take the edge off, the brutality of the past. I think fire made it livable, survivable. It really would have been horrible if you didn't have fire.
Yeah.
If they had no running water and they had light bulbs, instead of fire, you know what I'm saying? I just think they were so much better off with fire. Fire just takes the edge off everything made out of wood and everything being clunky and everything being vacant, because fire was just, it's like TV, you know what I mean?
Yeah. That had like fire and horses, right?
Yeah, fire is like the internet, it's like like the first internet. I mean, it's the mind expander kind of thing,
Everybody's watching their fire.
Yeah, well, I just mean it.
No bullshit in the fire, right? There's no ads, no crap.
Yeah, exactly. But I just mean that it is I can see reading by the fire. I can see thinking by a fire. Doing all that stuff by a fire does work.
Yeah.
You take it much more seriously. It seems realer. Life is real when there's a fire in the room.
That's true. Yeah, I like to go camping. I always enjoy a fire when I'm camping. I had I had the opportunity to visit Hawaii actually a while ago, and man, I was like, I don't know why any American doesn't live in Hawaii. It's fucking beautiful over there.
It's windy. That's one reason.
What's that?
It's windy. That's one reason. The
windy? Oh, it's just amazing. It's so nice there. Unbelievable.
I hate wind. It's almost.
No, you know what? I didn't notice any unusual wind when I was there. It just seemed fucking nice.
Well, I guess you must have had nice days. I'm just saying, generally speaking, most of the Hawaiian Islands are constantly 15 miles an hour at least, and often a lot more than that.
Right. Well, there's a lot of areas that are at elevation, right? It's just kind of like mountains sticking out. But
yeah, well, I just mean, unless you're on the right side of it all, I'm just saying it can be, the wind is just constant, and then the ocean is cold as fuck.
No. The ocean's not cold as fuck. It's nice. You can swim. It's perfect. It's beautiful. It really is nice over there. Yeah. I'm envious of those who get to live there for sure.
Yeah, fuck it.
Yeah, fuck it, Whatever. I'm just that was my experience.
Well, I'm just saying. It's just no. I'd take a Pacific island, like something much more eastern. Some sort of little island off of whatever, China or
something. Taiwan.
Yeah, something something more. Just the Hawaii's just not tropical enough for me.
Yeah, I've been to the Philippines as well, and
yeah, it's just too many people there to find anything that's not.
Yeah, but there's some less populated regions that I visited that were, very nice, very beautiful, very hot.
Yeah, well, that's my kind of.
It's scorching.
If I'm going to pick a tropical island, it's going to be more like that.
There's a lot of islands out there that are not that populated, actually. Like, they basically, like, their main islands, like, all the overcrowding is just happening on, like, 2 islands. And then there's all these little, just, like, they don't have enough freshwater islands to have a fucking million people out there.
Yeah, well, that's the catch, right? Is that you have to have enough money to, build yourself a survivor bubble.
Very cheap. It's fucking shockingly cheap over there.
Because you got to be able to, survive the, storms and the this and the that. So it does get a little.
That's true. Yeah, they got the fucking typhoons and shit.
Well, I just mean that's why people don't live on the island, is because you get washed off every 2 years.
It's nice out there.
Yeah, there's places that are nicer, but it's all a head game anyway. So I've sort of gotten good at that head game shit. So I know not to pay too much attention. I can just make it up.
Yeah. Just the weather, though. Fuck, sunny days are nice.
Yeah, I have to say it helps to be able to go with your mood. If you're in the mood to go outside, it's good to have weather that's not obnoxious.
You see, the culture that comes out of that kind of climate is like there's not as much distinction of inside and outside. Like, buildings are just for privacy. They don't really have much need of sheltering. Like, a lot of people sleep outside. Yeah,
well, I think that can work in a way, though. You're right.
It's nice. Yeah.
You can almost live in any synthetic world, and as long as you have, like I said, as long as you have fire in 1790, and as long as you have internet in 2016, and as long as you have this, and so like I said, you could live in SpongeBob land, as long as you had good food, or what I mean, whatever the comforting mechanism would be. So as long as you have something to get yourself involved in, a project.
Yeah.
Not really what matters is having something to get enthusiastic about. I mean, cheap whores or something.
Cheap whores. Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Yeah, well, you can always do physics.
Well, I'm just saying that's the two things in life, right? Is the puzzle solving, and one of the puzzles to solve is how to get in her pants. But I think that's about all there is, right? What else have I spent my life thinking about, right?
Yeah.
What am I doing here, and where are the white women at? I mean, there's just nothing else happening, agenda wise. It's balls and brain, and that's it. You're feeding one or you're feeding the other.
Yeah. Anyways, I think I'm gonna get going. Gotta go to work in an hour or so I should probably get ready. But
sorry about that. my salutations or whatever, consolidations.
Yeah, I think that was a good chat. I think we talked about some important stuff.
Yeah, well, we're just verifying that, man.
We're verifying the fuck out of it.
Yeah, well, there's just so much to play with here, and it's just such a disappointment that they've missed all of this shit. Because they keep trying to put the square peg in the round hole, and it's just like, man, you should see how fun it is when you have actual round pegs. This is a lot.
You're just flying through the holes, right?
Yeah, this is a lot better game when you got like a golf club made out of metal instead of whatever wood and horse shit.
Yeah.
So, all right, yeah, it was good, and so I'll probably, like I said, every couple of days I'll do one. I'll do one at night, then I do one in the morning. I'll do some kind of alternating like that. So.
Okay, great. Okay, see you later.
Thanks for the participation. All right, there, that was good. Mostly. Except, yes, without numbly numb and, holiday. So far, I can't find a third, but we'll have to work on that. So anyway, let's, did the 3 hours. I thought I'd do 2, but in future, we'll just see how it goes. See how I feel. And see how busy I am. Note-taking, constantly note-taking. Notes, drawings, constantly adding bigger, better, more. Yeah. Maybe I could put that on a hat and run for president. Bigger, better, and more. Yeah, that's better than make America great again. Yeah, we was great like before, mostly sometime or other. It was great back in. It was really good. Well, mostly, well, kind of. Well, if you don't count the World War, it was really well. If you think it's bad to be poor and broke, the Depression was well. Yeah, let's be great again. Pitiful. America was great when we had a 80% tax bracket. You think Donald Trump's going to bring that back? Pathetic. Oh, sorry, that's a separate. I'm sorry. This is physics. It doesn't have anything to do. This is supposed to be smart stuff. It doesn't have anything to do with Donald Trump. Oh, fucking idiot. It's retarded. It's a retarded psychopath running for president. Amazing. Anyway. So, thank you for viewing, the 12 of you, if you're really there. And we'll try again the next time. I don't know what the fuck that was. Yeah, camera. Maybe the camera's flipping on me. Yeah, damn camera's going flat. I don't know why it's doing this. I hate this shit. Battery isn't recharging properly. So it discharges when it's plugged into the charger. Stupid retarded fucker. I have to plug it into something else. Stupid piece of shit cameras. Well, they're actually very nice, but it's getting old. It has a sealed battery inside of it. You have to take the whole thing. You have to rip the glue apart, tear it all apart to get the battery out. Brilliant. In a negative way, of course. Let's see if it'll recharge. Anyway, so sorry. Superfluous added nonsense. So till next time. I said that already. Probably 4 times now. I'm bad at transitions. So you just say, fuck you, I'm going home. Fuck you, I'm going home.